scholars and participating us through the online for the FDP Faculty Development Program titled Blueprint to Breakthrough Research Methods and Techniques in Architecture, organized by MIT School of Architecture and Planning, Noida. This 5-day program aims to strengthen the research, develop innovations, and provide valuable insights into advanced research methodology, emerging technologies, data analytics, and intellectual property rights. We are truly honored to have you, all the academicians, experts with us who will sharing their knowledge and experience their thoughts through the program. To formally commence the program, I would like to invite our Dean Director of MIT School of Architecture Planning, Dr. Devendra Pratap Singh, Program Co-Chairperson, to introduce the FDP. Sir, you're on mute.
Distinguished guests, esteemed resource persons, colleagues, and dear participants, a very warm welcome to each one of you joining us today, whether you are in present with us here in hall in this G617 or connecting with us from across the country in this hybrid mode. So it is my privilege as Dean of Faculty of Architecture and Planning and Design to present concept note of this 5-day faculty development program. The theme of this program, Blueprint to Breakthrough Research Methods and Techniques in Architecture, it's not merely a title. It is a kind of declaration. It captures the journey of every serious researcher must undertake from the first conceptual sketch on a blueprint to the moment of breakthrough, where knowledge transforms into impact. So as Louis Kahn, one of the great architects, has mentioned, a great building must begin with unmeasurable and must go through measurable means when it is being designed, and in the end must be unmeasurable again. So research is precisely that bridge, the measurable means through which architecture achieves its unmeasurable purpose. It's very important that we should know that ponder on why this research in architecture matters today than few decades back. It's no longer confined to aesthetics or form making alone. So architecture is not only confined to these two things, it has evolved into a profoundly multidisciplinary domain. In classes, we see that when we talk to students, we integrate with subjects of sustainability, data analytics, artificial intelligence, at times human behavior, and innovation as well. The challenges of our age are climate resilience, affordable housing, smart cities, how to make our built environments more inclusive, and possibly the heritage conservation as well, as we are into an economy where this brownfield definitely has a larger impact. So all this has to be like, it demands some kind of evidence because we are talking of data where research driven responses are required to cater to these multidisciplinary domains. I remember one of the quotes from a Danish architect who once mentioned that first life, then spaces, then buildings. The other way around never works. So research is what keeps us anchored to life, to people, to place, to purpose. Without it, our buildings risk becoming monuments to assumptions rather than solutions to real human needs. So this 5 days of learning, we have designed this program as a carefully sequenced journey from foundations to frontiers. Briefly, I can illuminate what each day holds for you is that on day one, that is today, we will be talking about, or the presenters will be talking about the foundations of research in architecture. So we begin with the roots, identifying research gaps, formulating frameworks, defining objectives, hypotheses, and scope, and understanding at the same time the research ethics and academic integrity. So, our distinguished speakers, Dr. Ekta Singh and Dr. K. Dhote, will set tone for rigorous and responsible inquiry for this topic of foundations of our research in architecture. On day two, it will be more of data-driven research and AI in architecture, which is actually changing the game of research, not only research, but design as well, if we see in these times. So it is the overall environment is increasingly becoming data driven, maybe through GIS mapping, maybe environmental simulations, user behavior analytics, smart technologies. So, Dr. Kuldeep Kumar and Dr. Niharika Kushwaha will explore how artificial intelligence, the extension of it in machine learning, and predictive analytics are reshaping architectural and urban research. The day three will include literature review, innovation, and research mapping. How this literature review is changing from the earlier days, though the core remains the same, but probably every time new methodologies are coming in. So a rigorous literature review, which is the backbone of this high quality research. So day three will be led by Dr. Shaleen Singhal and Dr. K. Pandey, who will focus on systematic literature review techniques, bibliometric analysis, design thinking, and translating research into innovative, implementable research solutions. So, which is very important, especially for our field like built environment, unless our research has that meaning that it can be implemented or applied. So, more or less, if we can say the research in our domain always need to have a word in the background that is applied research. Then day four, this program will be about research paradigms and proposal development, where at times we have seen the faculty members who are still working on their PhD on their PhD topics. We have seen the freshers who wants to like join the PhD. So we see that architecture which demands these mixed approaches because since being the multidisciplinary field, there are many approaches to target this. So when you are talking of human perception, there can be a method. When you are talking of some kind of experiment, there can be there is a possibility in architecture and so many things. So a single method generally probably may not be helpful in doing researches, especially in areas of architecture planning, where multidisciplinary aspects are needed for the purpose. So, Dr. Satyaki Sarkar and Dr. Anurag Verma will guide participants through this qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods research design and the essential craft of research proposal writing. So, I think lots of questions, if coming from you in these areas, will definitely help you. Day five is about intellectual property rights and patent filing. So innovation without protection is a gift to the world without recognition. So one of our directors, Dr. Smita Sahu, and the MET IPR cell will equip participants with the knowledge to identify patentable research, navigate the patent documentation process, and translate architectural and technological innovations into commercially viable and socially impactful solutions. So there is a legal process to it, systematic way of doing it. So our experts from MIT University definitely will be helping you. And I will not miss on in quoting Steve Jobs, who once mentioned that innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. Then, overall, the broader significance of this entire FDP, it will reflect our institution's commitment to academic excellence, MET's philosophy of research-driven education, innovation, and meeting global academic standards. So we believe that architecture faculty or strong researchers become strong educators as well, and in turn produce graduates who are equipped not just to build, but to question, to investigate, and to transform. So Jahadi once mentioned there are 360 degrees, so why stick to one? So this in architecture we have this opportunity where research is our invitation to explore all 360 degrees, to push beyond the familiar, to question conventions, and discover solutions that have never existed before. So, I would like to place on record my deep appreciation to the organizing committee led by architect Snigdha, our distinguished resource persons and all supporting staffs for their relentless effort in bringing this program to life and in hybrid mode. No less ensuring that geography is never a barrier to learning. So to all our participants, be actively present, ask bold questions, network with peers, and carry back insights that will enrich your classroom, your research labs, and your design studios. The blueprints you develop here may well become the breakthroughs that shape our built environment for generations. So with these words, I wish every participant a fulfilling, enriching, and transformative learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for providing such a detailed overview of faculty development program and for highlighting its objective, structure, and significance. Your insightful explanation and has given the participants a clear understanding of the program and its academic relevance. So now we shall begin with the first technical session of the program.
Sudha, I think first there is a address by Honorable Vice Chancellor as well.
Yes, sir, but she's like not.
Hold for a while.
Okay, sir.
Snigdha, you can start. When Vice Chancellor is free, she will join in between, right?
Awesome, thank you. So we shall now begin with the first technical session of the program. Today's first session is on Introduction to Research Architecture, Research Gap, Framework, Objective, and Hypothesis. The session will be conducted by Dr. Ekta Singh, an eminent academician and leader, currently serving as the Dean at the School of Design, Architecture, and Planning, DIT University, Dehradun. With extensive experience in academic leadership, research, and higher education, he has made the significant contributions toward research-oriented learning in the fields of architecture and design. She is widely recognized for her ability to integrate the perspectives into architectural education and research practices. Dr. Singh has actively contributed towards encouraging innovation-driven academic environments and mentoring students and researchers in developing meaningful, impactful research outcomes. Her academic approach emphasized the critical thinking, methodological consistency, and the application of the research to contemporary architectural and societal challenges. Through her leadership and scholarly contributions, she continues to inspire academicians, researchers, and students toward excellence in research and the different interdisciplinary collaboration. I request Dr. Ekta Singh, ma'am, to kindly take over the session. Ma'am, you can start the session.
Okay. Thank you so much, Snigdha, and thank you so much, Professor Devin Pratap Singh. It's a pleasure for me to be on this platform and little nostalgic also, getting back to the old organization and really happy that I've been considered to take this session. Without spending much time, because I understand it's a 1.5 hour session, and already the stage has and the tone has been set by Dean School of Architecture and Planning, MIT University. I'll just share my screen. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So without wasting much time, I thought that I'll have some ice-breaking session and try to make it more interactive. But I think that we run short of time. So let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Dr. Ekta Singh, Dean School of Architecture and Planning, Dean School of Design at DIT University, Dehradun. And prior to this, I was with MIT University only and had a lot of learning with respect to especially the research in the field of architecture. So I understand that this is going to be the fundamental uh, lecture talk and the expert session that we are going to have and I'm possibly the opening batsman for this FDP. So probably I'll try to keep myself little constrained within the given time set and talk in general about the research in the field of the architecture. So I'll just give you a roadmap with respect to what all things we are going to cover today. Basically, because research, if we see in the field of the architecture, if we look into the last 2 decades in the field of the architecture, the term research has come as a new terminology because architecture has primarily been seen as a practice-oriented profession. And also, Professor Devin Pratap Singh also mentioned a couple of minutes back that we as an architect should look into the research as a systematic way to understand the different constraints and how those practice and how those design iterations that we make can help us make things better for ourselves and for the other stakeholders also. So the second we'll talk about the research in architecture, the framework, the paradigms, different framework and the paradigms which we need to consider before indulging into any proper research project or research studies, then identifying research gaps, problem statements, objectives. And then in the end, I would like to explain all those components of the research that we have been talking about with respect to my own research paper to give a clear picture of how all these things, when tied together, matter a lot when we talk about getting our research published. So to start or to set the conversation, can we have just a little interactive start of the session? So I'll just pose this question to all of you. What is research to you all? Any one of you would like to give me a brief interaction with respect to how do you understand research? Anyone? Okay, so we'll not waste much of our time. So research, many of you, I understand, are students who are doing, are faculty members who are doing the PhD research already, and few must have already been awarded with the PhD research. So one basic thing that we all, irrespective of the discipline we talk about, is that research is an inquiry that we usually do to either acquire an existing knowledge or create a new one. So acquiring existing knowledge is what is existing but is not known to people around us. So how can we use the research to make that knowledge known to others around you? Now, coming to the field of architecture, if we talk about research in architecture, I understand that there are two schools of thoughts, in my opinion. So one school of thought, which is very prominent, which takes field of architecture as a practice-oriented discipline and then questions why do we need to do an academic or a scientific research in the field of architecture? And then there is this school of thought, which is for last 2 decades, it has become very prominent and significant and have been advocating a scientific investigation into the different aspects of the architecture. So it has its own relevance, as we talked a couple of minutes back. But just to establish this opinion, I would like to contest this this first opinion or the school of thought that it's a practice-driven field. So why talk about research in this, or why talk about the scientific research? So I would like to just start this particular. I also took my inquiry and I went back to the history to understand that how research in architecture has actually evolved. Is it just last 2 decades or 2.5 decades that we have been talking about the research? Or research as such has always been existing in this discipline? But just it's simply that we've never formally talked about this research as a discipline in the field of the architecture. So I did some little study with, if on the left-hand side, if you see, there is this column which talks about different eras, which talks about different time periods. And each of this time period sets a tone with respect to the inquiry, which the builder, the architect, or the philosopher has taken up during that period and tried to answer that query, either through the practice or either through the observation. So while digging deep into the different research papers which I came across, I definitely used an AI to help me do the analysis of those research papers because it was a short period of time and I was not able to do comprehensively everything. And that is where the AI helps us. And I'm sure that in coming days, we will also be having a session on how to use the AI tools with respect to research. So if I look into I divided this whole set of papers into the 4 eras. I was able to categorize them under 4 different categories or the prompts, I can say. So the first era that we talk about, it dates back to something 3000 BCs to 17,000 century, where we are talking that the research has been used unconsciously in a systematic way by these people in these sculptures as a craft. And there they have been able to establish certain knowledge, which to date we all are using. So we start from the Vastu Shastra or Sthapati Veda. These are the oldest design building research which have been, or the document, I should say, which have been existing, but they have never been given this formal name of an academic research or a theoretical research. Then you talked about the Mansara or the Maya Mitra. So these basically talk about these 36 chapters. They are talking about the different materials, different structural measurements and the town planning, how they have been done. So they studied what was existing and they came up with their own research with respect to identifying the patterns, research with respect to identifying the structural nitty-gritties and the proportions which have been existing, and then they formalize them into a document. Whether it was Vitruvius or whether it was Alberti, to which we go back and refer on and off. Even today, many architects who are designing the buildings, I'm sure all of us go back to Vitruvius or the Alberti, but if we look into them, they have never been the formal architects. They have been the philosopher who had that inquisitive mind to query, to have the question, to which to get the answer by a certain system. So the idea is that what I want to establish here at this platform with this small research which I have been able to do, that the field of architecture was never devoid of research. So now what happened in the last 2 decades, the word academic research have been imposed upon the discipline of the architecture, which was already existing. So when the architects say, I remember 2 decades back, you forget about PhD, even people were not going for the masters because again, the advocacy was that it is a practice-driven field. But in that practice also, many of us were doing the research which was not getting systemized. So this was the first era where I see that the research was developed was used to create the knowledge using the craft form. Now, when we come to the second era, so we talked about the period from the 1750s to the 1960s. This is the period when the practice became institutionalized. The RIBA was established somewhere in 1863, or I don't remember the exact year, but it was somewhere in the middle of the 80s that the RIBA was established. So when RIBA came into existence, there was a kind of wave to regularize this all practice of creating buildings. So when this regularization of regulating the practice of creating building came, so then there came the concept of standardization. Then there came the concepts of creating the bylaws, the regulations. Then the question came how to create or how to standardize these things. Then the research again became institutionalized. So what I'm trying to establish that every era has its own way of conducting the research, had its own methods of conducting the research and institutionalizing it. Many of us, the Bahas for all of us is the starting point when we talk about the creativity, when we talk about the innovation, or when we talk about the standardization. So the beautiful thing which the Gropius thought process brought, or the school brought into, was it gave more importance to the practice and made it compulsory for the students that before designing anything, it is important for them to understand or to have a hands-on experience with the material, with the structure which they were talking about. So this again is a kind of research which now we call as the practice-led research. From after the Bahas came the time period of the post-war, that is the post-World War II. So RIBA, it became very active during that point period, and the standardization process which they adopted to create certain buildings, which became the masterpiece. Then the question case the question again, which gave rise to the research, that what about, is there any gap which is between the buildings which have been created using all those standards documents or all those standard bylaws? Are they actually creating that kind of environment with which it was conceptualized? So then create this whole era of doing research that we today call as the post-occupancy evaluation research, that is the POE, the concept which came from the Riba after the World War II. So again, if you see during this whole era, there was an effort to unconsciously institutionalize this whole process of creating the knowledge. And as we mentioned, research as well, it is all about indulging into inquiries so that you are able to uncover the existing knowledge or create new knowledge by identifying what is not known to the people or what needs to be known to the people. Now, this is a very interesting era when actually a very systematic way of giving the institutional thumbs up to the research was gradually established, but again, unconsciously. So Christopher Alexander, many of you, I don't know whether even I was not quite aware of his work until I did this whole research in the last 1 week. So I came across his work where he has spent 20 years documenting the pattern of the users of the people in a several habitation. So there he established 253 pattern. So this is a kind of research which became established as the practice-driven research. And then we talked about the Donald. So in 1983, he came up with this understanding that knowledge is always in action. So when the architects or the practitioners, while even creating the buildings, they are indulging into lot of queries. The only thing is this investigation, this inquisition never get to be documented in a properly way. So it is devoid of that academic research labeling. But still, it is a research that thinking is a form of inquiry which is getting converted into the knowledge. And then you talk about the one very interesting and important paper. It is just a one length paper of Frailing, which talks about 3 different modes of the research. That is the research for design, research into design, and research through design. Here he established that the practitioner or even any of the projects that you are doing, during doing those projects, we do 3 things. We do some research which is required to establish the context of that particular research you are doing. That is, you do the literature, you do the reading of the precedent. So that is for design. So these 3 words, for, into, through, they become the starting point for the PhD researchers in UK, especially in the colleges, the Royal College of Art, where it was established. So, and today, if we talk about, so one important thing which I forgot to mention about the term hypothesis. The term hypothesis, which came into existence the first time in the field of architecture when it was heard, was through the study of the logamous primitive, the primitive herd, where he talked first about the hypothesis, the herd hypothesis in the field of the architecture, if we talk about. So he came up with this hypothesis that nature itself provides the prototype for correct architectural form. So here he has used, I'll just share this image with you all. I tried to create it using the AI. So he used this anomaly from the, I don't know where it is gone. So I don't know what is happening. So this is what he tried to do. Is the figure visible to your image? Snigdha, is the image visible to you all? Okay, so I'll just explain to you. So Logier, what he did, he took the concept of 4 trees standing together close by, and he joined the top of those 4 trees to give the anomaly of the column and beam structure. So he tried to work on this hypothesis with an argument that nature provides the prototype for correct architectural form, and he used this whole exercise to prove this hypothesis. So the concept of hypothesis, again, it is not new to the field of architecture. It has been existing. since many years, again unconsciously. And one very important study was done by the Duran. So today, which established the context for the comparative research studies. What he did, he took the temple architecture, he took the church architecture, and he took the school architecture to create the anomaly with respect to the traditional forms, how these forms can be compared. And that is how he established this whole framework with respect to the structure during one particular era. So I was talking about that during this era, that is the third era which we are talking about, it is basically where the focus is on the practice. How the practice gets converted into a document which can be called the knowledge creation document, or the artifact itself is an outcome of the research. So, and today when we look into this, we have a very well-established system which we can see. I tried to create it into two columns. One is the dedicated architectural journals where we try to publish the scientific research, and the other is the different milestones with respect to the practice. So one is the theoretical arena where we published all theoretical research, and the other is the practice-driven arena where many research are being conducted, taking leads from the established documents or taking leads from the established white papers or the projects which have been conducted by the different professional bodies. The starting point for the present era of architectural research, if we talk about, it is the Grote and Wang. And I'm sure that many of you must have studied her book, Research Methods, which talks about the different paradigms of the architecture and what are the different paradigms one should be considering before starting your own proper research framework. So based on this whole 4 eras, if we talk about, I could divide them into 2 broad streams or 2 broad categories. So one is the academic category, the stream, if you see, which is based upon the theories, which is based upon the observation, and the other is the practice-led empirical stream, if we see. So which is again based upon the observation, how people have documented the different phenomena which have been existing in the field of the architecture, or I should say in the field of the built environment since last so many centuries. And this is where the importance lies, how we are able to converge this theoretical stream with this practice-led to create an institutional system which can be adopted by the all. So this becomes the starting point for me to talk about the research framework, which is my main topic of discussion, theme of discussion today. And I would also like to highlight at this particular point, if we look into this, this is the what we call is a very important milestone in the field of the architecture. If we talk about, this is where the evaluation framework for the research in the field of architecture was created, and the RIBA gave the institutional authority with respect to practice being considered as the PhD. So all those contests that we talk about, and we say that PhD or the academic research is a new term to the field of architecture. This is what I was trying to establish, that it is not a new term. Practice has always had the highest caliber of being converted into a PhD research. So if we talk about research in architecture, what all we understand that it's a systematic process of creating new knowledge, of validating the existing theories, and also solving certain problems, specific problems which you identify or define. It may be related to the structure, it may be related to the climate, as we were talking a couple of minutes back during the introductory session. And the most important thing about any research is that it becomes an academic research if it is replicable, if it can be documented, and it can be critically evaluated by anyone who has access to your document. So these are the very 3 important things with respect to making any research scientific or making any research generalized, especially the PhD research when we talk about. So if we want to summarize this, so we can say that It's a discipline of scientifically answering the inquiry. Inquiry can have any nature. So how do you answer that inquiry in a systematic way that makes it converted into the research? So this is one very important slide which I have always been talking to almost all of my research scholars and even the undergraduate students when I talk to them with respect to doing the secondary research and also the primary research before even they start with their project. Because even for the projects, the studio projects that we do a lot of primary studies, we do a lot of secondary studies. But the most important thing is until and unless we understand the paradigm, which is the guiding principle with respect to identifying the pattern of your research, is very important. So these are the two very important concepts, the ontology and the epistemology. And I'm sure in the next few weeks, somebody will be talking to you in depth with respect to these two concepts. I'll just give a brief mention of this. Ontology addresses to the reality, that what is the nature of the reality that we are talking about. And epistemology talks about how that reality I can know. So there is a certain fact which might be existing in the ecosystem. What is the nature of that fact? So when we talk about what is the nature of that fact or the reality, there can be three probable answers. And this has also been established in the growth research book, if you will read it. And it gives you a very comprehensive understanding with respect to these three answers I'm talking about. So one is the realist, the other is the relativist, and the third is the pragmatist. So realists talk about that there is only one reality which exists in the nature. So people who are firm believer or there is a truth which can be just measured, and when somebody measures it, it gives you the same answer. So that becomes the objective truth. That is the only one truth. Relatives talks about that, no, there are many truths which exist simultaneously. So when we say there are many truths which exist simultaneously, that is, it is subjective. If I, as a person is perceiving one thing, it may be give me a different perception or opinion, and it may give Snigdha a different person or opinion. So that is, the reality is one. We, both of us are looking at one reality. And the most simplest example that I always give to my student is when we look at a glass which is half filled. So for somebody, it is half filled, and for somebody, it is half empty. So that is where the relativist opinion changes. So the truth becomes subjective at this particular point. And the pragmatist approach says it may be objective for someone and it may be subjective for someone. So depending upon the context, I need to understand my pattern of the research. So before you even start indulging formally or scientifically into identifying your gap, into doing the literature study, into making your research framework, it's a very important question that you need to answer. The second is this fact or this truth which we are talking about. How do I know that truth? So what is the method that I can adopt? What is the tool that I can adopt to identify this truth? So the objectivist approach says that it is measurable. That is, the knowledge is existing and I can discover that knowledge by using any tool. The subjectivist approach says that knowledge can be co-created by me being the observer or the researcher. So I am the researcher. I can create that knowledge based upon my own opinion. That is where we talk about the qualitative research. And this is where we talk about the quantitative research. Now, this is the transactional term. Transactional again is something which is between the objective and the subjective that we talk about. That is, knowledge is emerging. For example, in most of the ethnographic studies, if we see, the researcher becomes, there are two ways to do the ethnography research. One is either you stand at the periphery, you are not an active participant of the system. The other is you become the active participant of the system. So when I become the active participant of the system, I am also experiencing the whole reality. So I am interpreting reality in my own understanding. So this gives the subjective approach to the research, and the participant or the subject, which is the subject to whom I'm studying. For him, that reality is objective. For him, that reality is what have been existing for him for over a period of time. When these two emerges or come together, it becomes its transactional. So a new knowledge may emerge out of this. So this is the paradigm which should be clear to any of the research scholars before you start talking. I tried to create one example here to make you understand ontology and epistology. So the example is that you want to study some house in Jodhpur. Now the reality is that it has this U value of this much. Now it depends who is going to ask this question. Now who becomes relativist? It may be home for me. For somebody, it may be a heritage. For somebody, it may be a building. And for somebody, it may be a poverty, because the kind of house he or she is living, it has a different, it does not lead to his or her aspiration. So all this thought process may change my ontology. That is, what is the truth for me, and the way I approach to discover this truth. So this is a very important thing before you start doing. And based on this ontology and epistemology, the Groth and Wang gave 3 research methods, which is very well documented in her book also. So one is the interpretive, the other is qualitative, second is the quantitative, and this is the design research, where we are talking about the practice becoming the research. So when an architect is creating his own or her building, which is a process of more than 1 year plus, so this whole period becomes the period of research for him. And in the end, when that output is there, so that output becomes the research output or the artifact only when it is well documented. So when I'm trying to do research with respect to historical theories or from the lens of the history, it is known as the interpretive, that I'm trying to interpret it with respect to the history. For example, if I talk about the Chandigarh city, so Chandigarh city was built by Le Corbusier, and there are so many existing sketches of Le Corbusier till date. And if I intend to dive into those sketches of Le Corbusier or those existing documentations of how the Chandigarh city was planned during that time, so it becomes a kind of interpretive. Why? Because it is my opinion and my perception, which I'm trying to build with my own understanding by doing a thorough systematic analysis of the existing documents. Qualitative is, again, I'm trying to capture the experience of the user, his or her social behavior, trying to understand the spatial perception. And quantitative, we were talking about the post-occupancy evaluation. So these are the different research methods, modes, which you will be talking in depth in the coming times. Since this is the main introductory session, so I thought that it is important for me to make mention of these methods. And this is the table which I was able to draw with the help of the Claude AI by putting in my thought process and my research paper and my keywords. So these are the 7 different strategies which the Groth has given. One is the interpretive, the qualitative, the correlational, the experimental, the simulation and modeling, logical argumentation, case study, and combine. So how do we see them with respect to what the reality is, that is the ontological, how that reality I can identify using which kind of tool. Now this understanding gives me the key methods, what could be the probable method to do, to engage with this inquiry. And these are certain examples. Chandigarh, I was talking to you about earlier also. So these are the certain examples. I will not go into the depth of it. You can see in the last one is my own paper, which I've kept in the transactional stage, because I was part of this whole process also. I experienced that whole corridor, and also I was interacting with the users who were using that corridor, of which I did the study. So that gave me the new insight, and it became transactional in nature. So if you want, you can go into the depth of this 7 strategies, which are usually simulation and modeling. It is the newest one that most of us are using when we are doing the parametric design. We are using certain tools which are well established. And transactional also, I will try to give you an example with respect to if I'm using simulation also, and that is the quantitative. And I'm also talking to the users for whom I'm doing that simulation, so that makes it qualitative. So it becomes transactional in nature, both of us coming together. So now coming to the understanding of the research gap, we all know what the research gap is, but the most important failure that we encounter most of the time is that how to identify the right kind of gap, whether that gap is going to lead to something actually concrete, which can be converted into a knowledge or into an inquiry. So gap is all between what is known and what is unknown, and how do I decipher this unknown? Again, I came across this very good research paper written by Almusat and Yatman and et al. So they categorize the research gap, the kind of research gaps that we see in the architectural academic research. They had done some systematic literature review, and after that, they defined these 5 categories of the research gap. The research gap can be theoretical, where we are trying to establish some gap in the existing theory. For example, there are a number of Western theories with respect to the passive architecture or the passive strategies. Can those passive strategies are workable in any tropical vernacular architecture? It's a theoretical gap for which I'm just giving an example. Somebody might have done the research on this, so I don't claim that it has not been done. But just to set the tone, I took this example. Then the methodology. There are certain methodology, but some methodology might be insufficient. If you came across certain papers, you did the study with respect to the methods which those papers have been talked about. So you might be able to identify certain gap with respect to certain particular building typologies where it has not been used, or where the result is contrary to what the experience of the user says. Now, technical is, for example, AI has come a lot into use nowadays. So you might come across the paper where the paper is talking about AI driven strategies being used in different kind of scenarios, but in kind of one particular heritage scenario. For example, it may be the UNESCO buildings, it may be the Bauli. So where you can identify that the technical gap is there, that these kind of applications have not been used them. So they came to be known as the technical. And contextual is something which most of us, most of the time do, that a certain study has been done in certain context, but the context with respect to the Indian settings is missing. So that is the contextual gap. And practical is what we have already been spoken about. For example, we talked about the REBA, that in 19th, the REBA did this post-occupancy evaluation. But you will see that many of these studies which have been done, many of these studies have not been formally transformed into some tools which can be used to create a better buildings in the future. You may come across some those kind of gaps. So you can even categorize the gaps which you identify into theoretical, methodological, technical, contextual, and practical. This is what starts making your research very scientific in nature. And this also gives you a kind of evidence, because when we talk about the research, most of the time, we are asking the research scholar to create the rationale for it or to establish the authenticity of it. So when we start using the systematic processes, that gap itself gets addressed. Now, this is the example which I did brainstorm using the AI, and these stepwell have been a very well documented monument or the structure in Gujarat, and many papers you will talk about, many documentaries you talk about, which talk about this whole stepwells. So I tried to create certain prototypes with respect to what could be the gaps. So stepwells have been documented, but no, what have been the gap? I identified certain research paper, which I took and did the analysis with the help of the AI. A certain study which was done using the 6 stepwells of Ahmedabad, Patan, and Jaipur. The gap which the study found in the existing document was that the study was there which said that yes, there is a microclimate which is created in these step wells, but that microclimate was never measured in any of the studies. So they identified this as the gap and they conducted the research. Similarly, I talk about this Ran Ki Vav, which is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. I identify certain papers using the systematic literature review. And many of the papers which did this study had this one very prominent gap which they had identified with respect to the theoretical intervention or the methodological intervention which was missing. We do experience, the user do experience the difference between the temperature in the inside and outside, but there was no existing scientific document of it. So that did the study. So this is how, so the study has been existing for long, but the inquiry with respect to the parameter you have in your mind was not there. So that establishes the gap for you, which you can use to your advantage to do your research. So this is how you can identify, you can look into the existing studies. So when we talk about research gap, we do certain studies. So these are the 4 prominent ways to look into. You should never identify gap by just looking into one particular typography or the one particular category of the study. Most of us, when we are trying to identify the gap, we do systematic literature review. We look into the papers which have been established by the Q1, Q2, Q3, or Q4 journals. So, but it becomes very skewed when we talk about the architecture profession, because as we have established in the last few slides, that many of the research has also come from the practice. Many of the knowledge has also come from the practice. So you should also look into the documents which have been done by these professional bodies, by the local councils, and also look into the, now we see Professor Deven Pratap Singh was talking about the patent and the innovations. So even in the field of architecture, we see that this has become very prevalent. So we should also look into the documents which talks about the new patents in the technology which has come. What I'm trying to establish here is never just rely on one particular category of the study to identify your gap, because then it is unaddressed. It will be incomplete. So I could come across these 4 different kind of documents or these 4 different kind of resources which you can go into and look into when you are doing research related to architecture or even for that matter planning. Now coming to the need, we talk about what is the, I'm sure many of you, when you have been defending your synopsis, this question has always come that why you should be allowed to do this study. So 2 questions always come. What is the need for this study and what is the rationale for this study? So when we talk about the need, the 3 most important stakeholders that you should always keep in mind when you are trying to identify the need with respect to your own research work is the academic community. Whatever question you have in your mind, whatever objectives or aims you have framed, does it add to any new knowledge in the existing discipline? Does it create some value for the existing theories which are extending there, or it works upon, or is it testing, or it is challenging some existing theory which is there in the system? Then what good does it bring to the practicing community? Will it increase the performance of the building? Will it add to the sustainability concept? Will it add to the circular economy? So what way is this going to help the professional community? It helps you establish the need. And the third and the most important when we talk about architecture is the end user. So whenever you are establishing the need, just think about these 3 stakeholders. And once you bring those 3 stakeholders into the picture, you will see it becomes easy for you. If you are able to answer these 3 questions with respect to those 3 stakeholders, it becomes easy for you to establish the right need for your research work. So once you have the need and the rationale for your research work, the most important question comes is to defining the problem statement. So many times I have seen my own research scholars also that what is mentioned in their aim does not relate to their research question, does not relate to the problem statement, and does not translate into the objective. This happens only when we are not adopting the systematic approach. And we always say that academic research is a systematic process. We talked about how to identify the research gaps. We talked about how to establish the need. And from that need, you come to the problem statement. So any problem statement you are making, you are creating, just keep in mind that it should address these three things. That is the context. What is the context you are talking about? What is the problem that you want to address? And what will happen if that problem is not addressed? So that is the consequences. So that is which also establishes the need for your research. So for example, I took this example of a study. So I tried to bifurcate, or I tried to do a surgical analysis of that research. So the context was somebody was trying to study the urban population in the sub-Saharan African cities, where the concern was it will be double by population will be double by 2050. And they wanted to study about how to make the settlements, the informal settlements in this area more sustainable with respect to adopting the passive strategies, so that in coming time, it should not lead to the energy intensive mechanical cooling, use of the energy intensive mechanical cooling, which will increase the load on the grids, which indirectly will not address the sustainability agendas which the UNDP or the United Nations sustainability goals are addressing to. So he talked about the context, he talks about the problem and the consequences if the problem is not addressed timely. So these strategy or this formula in most of the time has helped me to arrive at the right problem statement and also my students. So I thought that I will share this with you here. Now, the other important topic which I was I'm supposed to talk about is framing the title. I have seen when we are doing the research, PhD research, in most of the PhD research in last 10 years, in my role as the PhD coordinator and also in my role today as the chairman RAC, even the student, when he reaches the 5th and the 6th semester, the RAC is most of the time challenging the title which he or she has created. So it becomes very important. Creation of title is not something very casual. It again requires a systematic approach. Your title should be able to address three important things. I should say four important things. Two can be overlapping. One is the discipline which you broadly your theme or your research is going to address to. Second is the context which you are talking about. And the third is the method which your particular study is going to adopt to answer the problem or the question that you have in your mind. So I took the example. I will go back. So this is, if I see, I don't know why is it not going. So if I look into the last example which I was talking about was with respect to the sub-Saharan region. But if I look it into the climate of Rajasthan or the context of the Rajasthan, I want to talk about the sustainability. My theme, my passion is that I want to do something in the area of the sustainability in architecture. And I'm also at the same time, I'm very much into understanding the traditional knowledge system which have been existing and how that traditional knowledge system can be used for the climatic, to address the climatic disadvantages in these areas and make the life of the people comfortable. So the context is the semi-arid climate of Rajasthan. The discipline I'm talking about is the environmental. And the subject or the method which I want to use is the thermal evaluation of these structures in Rajasthan. So the title which I came up with, it talks, I don't know why it is not going. Is the title visible to you all in the last line? So I thought the best thing to frame this whole research background, the best way could have been passive cooling in Rajasthan's hot dry climate using the thermal investigation strategies. Now, these are few examples which I contemplated with myself, which I did some brainstorming with myself, that what, with respect to certain areas, what could be the common title and what could be the strong version of those title, to give you some understanding where we fall when we are framing the title. So somebody could write a comprehensive solution to urban heat islands. So it's a very generic statement that we are talking about. Comprehensive solution of what kind, what discipline you are talking about. Urban heat island, is there any specific context you are talking about? No, because it cannot be generalized. So I thought with more deliberation and with more brainstorming, a stronger title emerged, that is the urban heat island mitigation. I want to mitigate the urban heat island effect through using green infrastructure, and a case from Ahmedabad or evidence from Ahmedabad or a study from Ahmedabad. This is what we do most of the time. So generalization in your title is something that you should be avoiding, and ensuring that all three components should be reflected in the title that you are making. Because when your thesis or when your research or even when your research paper goes to the referee for review, because I, as a reviewer, also do not first indulge deep into the research paper or the main body or the main manuscript. The important things which any reviewer will first see is your title, then is your abstract, then is your aim, your research question or the hypothesis, and the objectives, and in the end, the finding. So all these 3, 4, 5 things, they matter a lot with respect to framing them properly. Now, this is the whole script of the presentation which I was asked to make. So I thought that I will bring it all on one page. So you start from the research gap, then you have the aim, you have the title, then you define the aim, the objective, the hypothesis, the research question, the scope, and the expected outcomes. If you do not have clarity of all these 6 things, your research paper is likely, or your research thesis is likely to be getting rejected at most of the points during your whole journey of the research. Because if I do not, at the starting, if I do not have a clear picture, I will not be able to bind them together. And if I'm not able to bind them together, my research question will talk about something else. My objective will talk about something else, and my aim is not an aim, but sometimes it becomes an over-ambitious statement, which my research will not be able to achieve. So that is why this whole research framework becomes important, or the methodology becomes important. I would also like to differentiate at this particular point that there is a stark difference between research framework, research methodology, and the research methods. Research framework is what I'm talking about with you right now, and what you can see as a quick reference below. This is a picture which I need not at the end of my research, but at the starting of my research. Then only I will have the right question, and then only I will have the right methods to investigate those questions. So aim, many times I have seen most of the research scholar, the aim is a very big paragraph. Please remember, your aim should not be more than 1 or 2 sentences. If you're able to bring it to 1 sentence, nothing like that. And then from that aim, you should have, there is also a question most of the time we talk about that objective should be defined after the literature review or after the research question. But I think that this goes parallelly. All these brainstorming, all this research is happening parallelly. So framing of objective, research question, and aim also happens parallelly. So always keep this in mind, that there is no strong flow of one after the other. Many things keep overlapping. The objectives have to be 3 to 5. You should not have less than 3 objective, and a good research paper or a research thesis should not have more than 5 measurable tasks, which becomes the objective. And ensure all the objectives which you are listing is something that you are able to do, because objective is the task that you do to address the inquiry or to reach at the destination which your aim is talking about. I will talk scope. I will talk now. I had given one slide each to all these 6 things to give you a better understanding. So aim, again, I took an example of passive cooling because I thought that I will keep it close to the sustainability so that the flow is established with respect to one theme. So the passive cooling in public houses in Chennai, this is the broad discipline which I'm talking about. So if I want to investigate, my aim could be to create a guiding framework. Like I mentioned in the last slide, this is the outcome I'm looking into. What my outcome of research is going to be. Is it going to be a model? Is it going to be just a proposition? Is it going to be a framework? Is it going to be a manual? Or is it going to be a prototype? So I need to have that clarity based upon my background research, based upon the gaps which I have identified, that what is going to be the conclusion of my research. So to create a guiding framework of passive design strategies, what I'm going to investigate for thermal comfort, for what am I doing it? That is the context also and the user also, and the method also. So now this is the aim. Now this aim gets translated into 5 different objectives, which are all directional in nature. When we say directional, that means objective 1, the result of the objective 1 should lead to the objective 2. The result of objective 2 should lead to the third one. The result of third should lead to the fourth, and finally, the final outcome, which is the final objective. So this is the process or the systematic flow which we should be following. Now, many times when I talk to the research scholar, there is a confusion. One more basic question which I have seen is, should my research have a hypothesis or a research question, or it should have both? So the first thing that we all need to understand, and I'm sure many of you might already be knowing, that every research need not have a hypothesis, because hypothesis is basically an assumption that we make or we create based upon our theoretical underpinning. And hypothesis is used when you are trying to establish a relationship between two things, any two parameters, or one parameter you are trying to identify with respect to 2 or 3 attributes. So when you have this kind of equation, which can be measured, which can be tested, then you should go for the hypothesis. So it has quantitative nature when I talk about the pattern. So you use the research approach or the methodology to either prove it or to reject it. So null hypothesis or alternative hypothesis, as we all know. And then the research question is when you want to indulge into an exploratory study, that is, you want to do an open-ended inquiry into the existing system. There is not defined relationship between anything, or there is not defined any objective conclusion to it. So it has more of a qualitative nature. Then you should go for research question. And in some research where we talk about the pragmatic, like I mentioned earlier, or the transactional, which are basically the mixed method approach. You are using both quantitative and qualitative, that is the positivist and the subjectivist. So there you can use both hypothesis and research question. Your hypothesis may lead to certain research question, and those research question will lead to certain objectives which you want to answer. So in the end, so that was all about the titles, the gaps, the objectives, the research question, and the different paradigms that we talk about in the research, which you should have the clarity. Now, this is the end part of the research where I thought that all those 5-6 things that we have been talking about, I will try to show you with respect to my own research paper, which was published in 2021 in the Sprinter Journal. So before I go deep into this, I would like to ask if any one of you have any question with respect to the basic fundamental discussion that we had about the basic research framework that you should do, you should ensure before you start indulging into your proper framing of the research methodology.
Ma'am, we have given a proper time slot for the question answer session
Okay.
after our session.
Am I going too fast?
No, ma'am.
I don't know. I was just in flow, so I was just trying to create a storyline for that, but I don't know whether people were able to catch with my pace. Sometimes I never realize that I'm too fast. So please let me know if it is the case.
Sure, ma'am.
So this is the last few slides. So this is one of the paper I had also mentioned when I was talking about the patterns in the research when we were talking about the growth research methods in architecture. So the last paradigm or the pattern or the strategy of the research methodology in architecture, which I mentioned, I related it to my own, that is the transactional style, that is the mixed method approach, which I have adopted. I have hidden the name of my co-author because without the permission of the co-author, I should not be revealing his or her name here. So you see, the title is Decongesting Urban Roads: An Investigation into Causes and Challenges. So now we will identify what the research gap this paper has addressed, what was the problem statement I framed, how this correlates with the title and the research question and the methodology. So the research gap, we talked about when we were talking about the research gap, how to frame the problem statement, you should talk about the context, the problem, and the consequences. What is the context and what is the problem which is existing in this context, and what happens if this problem is not resolved? The research gap which I was able to identify, it is contextual and practical research gap. Under those 4 research gaps, the categories which I mentioned. So contextual, I'm talking about the New Delhi urban scenario. Practical, I'm talking about the kind of congestion which is happening on these roads because of the certain constraint which we see over a period of time developing on this small stretch that I have been talking about. And so the gap which I was able to establish is that many interventions have been implemented on this corridor, which is the Guru Ramdas corridor. It is one of the very used corridor when we go to the Jamia Hamdard and this Jamia Millia. It connects that whole stretch of the Okhla and this, and one of the very used and one of the very oldest. So a lot of interventions we have seen coming up in this on this road. But despite of these intervention, the problem of the daily congestion is still persists. So this was the research gap which I identified. And based on this research gap, the problem statement that I framed was the context is rapid urbanization, industrialization, leading to vehicle growth, leading to imbalance between the infrastructure and the mobility demand, because the mobility demand has become multimodal on that road. And because of the rapid urbanization, lot of traffic movement is there, which is not being able to decongest. Existing intervention is the problem that I mentioned here, and the consequences of this problem, that the existing intervention is not leading to any particular solution, is that the health of the people in those areas is deteriorating because of the vehicular pollution. Then there are delays with respect to people reaching their destination. Then also the accidents on that roads. During that time when I was doing the research, what the data I collected were many. And also it leads to the economic cost because of the delays, because of the disadvantages that it is bringing to the environment. So the focus, this is how I was able to frame the problem statement. And the phenomena, the title, how did I created the title of this particular research? I followed the phenomena, that is the urban roads which are decongested. I want to decongest the urban roads. So that is the phenomena I want to intervene. The approach that I did was the investigation. I could have made it little more better by saying using the pragmatic intervention approaches. But that time, probably over a period of time, my maturity with respect to research is also coming. And then the focus was what are the causes and what are the challenges. So I used these three categories to frame my title, which was simple, but still leading to certain conclusions, what the research intends to do. So based on this basic understanding, I had framed this research aim. So to identify and analyze. So what I'm going to do in my research was to identify the causes and the challenges. And then I wanted to analyze the challenges which I have identified using the data. On a typical urban arterial road, that is the context which I'm talking about, which is the multimodal corridor. And the approach that is to inform targeted decongested strategies. So the aim of my research was basically what could be the strategies and how did I arrive at that strategy by doing the intervention, and to doing the intervention, what all things I did with respect to identifying and analyzing the causes and the challenges. So this research question, this aim gave me these three research questions. I wanted to understand the causes and the challenges. To understand the causes and the challenges, I needed to understand the LOS of this particular area with respect to the different kind of transport which this whole corridor is addressing to. So what is the designed capacity of this corridor and what it was catering to? So that was the one thing which I wanted to find. Then what are the other attributes of on this road? For example, the encroachment, the street geometry. So this was all the data which which was addressing to the causes and the challenges. So the research question 2 also addressed to the challenges, the causes. And then the research question 3, how do multimodal traffic composition pattern is also leading to the congestion on this road. So all the three research questions which I framed with respect to this research paper, it was part of the broader study, addressed to the causes and the challenges, which was the major terminology in my title. And then I talked about the scope, that what I'm going to exclude. This is again a very important thing. Scope and limitation, many times we get confused. Scope is something what my research study is going to do. That is, I'm defining, for example, I had defined the geographic context of my research in this scope, that only 2.1 kilometer of the stretch I will be studying. I will only be studying the road type. So this is, I'm defining the scope. Every time, I don't know why this is coming here. Okay, I can't do this. So what I did excluded that my qualitative survey will not look into the economic cost. This research paper, I did not consider the user survey, but in my broader research, I did do the qualitative study of the users on this corridor. And then different attributes related to the parking, related to the land use also I considered. So I defined my scope in a very explicit way. And the methodology which I did to arrive at the causes and the challenges, that what are the existing causes and the challenges, that was my inquiry. I did the literature study, the systematic literature study with respect to site selection. If you can go and look into my research paper, it is available on net. You will see that a systematic approach has also been applied to identify the site. I randomly did not pick up the site because you need to establish the rationale why this stretch only you are talking about, why not the other stretch. So when you're talking about the scientific research, these evidences and these rationales become very important. So I did the literature study, and based on those literature studied, I identified the baseline data which I needed to cover, or I needed to collect using my primary survey. And then the physical attributes which I need to understand, that is the research question 2, which I'm talking about, or the scope 3, which I'm talking about. So you see how everything is interrelated. I'm talking about scope also when I'm looking into my research methodology. I'm talking about my title also, and also my research question, because each research question will be converted into one particular set of data which I want to collect. So that is why this knitting of this whole research framework becomes important. So then analysis and the synthesis, which I did to create this cost challenge framework. I had used, I'll not go into the details of what all methods I have used, but I just wanted to establish how my research methodology has relation with respect to my title, my question, my objectives, and my scope and limitation. This is something I always say, that when you are looking into research, how should you pose yourself with respect to, for example, how do you cite? These are some basic things I thought that I should not mention, but then I thought it's okay to mention it. When you are citing your research paper, for example, my research has been cited by somebody. So this is basically how I do. And how do I read a research paper efficiently when I'm doing my own research? So these are the major checklists you can follow to get a glimpse, because when we are doing systematic literature review also, you end up downloading 400, 500 research papers during the time of your PhD research. Now it becomes very difficult how to segregate which one to read into depth and which one to not. This is something also which you will read in the systematic literature review in the sessions which will be following up in the coming time. So these are the important things which can help you zero down the papers which you should look into and what are the aspects you should look into. And when you are reading these papers, how should you situate your own research framework? The research framework that we talked about, not research methodology. That is, what is my paradigm? What is my parameter? What is my ontological assumption with respect to my inquiry? What are my questions that I'm looking into? Does it conflict with this existing study or not? Does it give me any opportunity or not? What are the geographies these papers have been talking about and where I see myself situated into? So these are certain guidelines that you can look into and which can help you connect your own study with respect to the literature that you are deep diving into. Now, this is the quick framework that you should always do. I also have shown this thing in the earlier slide, but here I'm doing a little dissection with respect to this. This is where what should be ready with you, even before you start formalizing your research methods and research investigation tools. So you should have the understanding of the gap, what is missing in the literature or the practice. Does it really have any consequential outcomes which you can address and which brings value to all those three stakeholders we have talked about? Where are you going to limit your research? What should come? What is the area that you are going to focus on, and how to create that title? I tell you, title is something, and aim is something, and objective is something where we have seen research scholar coming to semester 6th and 7th also, and then taking special permission to change the title and the objective. So the idea is that this is the time, at least first year of your research, you need to spend on creating this whole framework systematically with the help of your guide or with the help of your co-author, whosoever is doing this. I think that I do not need to go into detail. Everything has been talked in depth in the earlier slide. And again, I would like to reinforce that expected outcome is something which we all foresee forthcoming, even before your research is finished. So expected outcome is, again, is it a prototype? Is it a theory you are going to promote, advocate? Is it a framework, guideline? Is it a manual? Is it a policy recommendation only? So you should have that clarity with respect to what you are coming with at the end of your research, because that will help you achieve the framework with respect to the research tools that you are going to adopt, the kind of data that you are going to do, and the kind of research paradigm that you are going to indulge into. These are the key reference with respect to making my presentation, which I have done. And of course, yes, I have taken help of such an AI to synthesize my research methods, to synthesize my research papers, which I have downloaded in last 1 week. I also ended up downloading around 60 to 70 research paper while doing my study with respect to how the research in the field of architecture has evolved over centuries. When I'm talking about all those 4 phases or the eras, how the knowledge is creating using craft, how the knowledge got institutionalized, how the knowledge was there in the practice, and how do we see research today, a well-established academic research field. So that is all that I wanted to share with you all. So any questions if you all have? I was very fast and very quick because I wanted to stick to the time because I have a meeting which is coming up. I was not speculating that this will, I thought that it might end up till 2 o'clock. So that prompted me to be a little faster and quicker in my approach. You are on mute, Snigdha.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful and enriching session. I'm sure the participant gained valuable understanding research regarding this research framework and strategies and methodologies. We shall now move towards the QA session. Now I'd like to invite Lavdita Khurana to take over the session for the QA.
Very good afternoon, ma'am, and thank you for this enriching session.
Good afternoon.
For our participants offline and online, I would just like to tell that how this session had given us an understanding of the strong research foundations, beginning with identifying meaningful research gaps and structuring ideas into well-defined framework with clear aims, objectives, scopes, and everything. So the floor is now open for questions and any discussions. I request all the participants to kindly switch on their microphones and ask their questions or any key points for discussions from ma'am. Do we have any questions?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, Vikas, you are audible.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am.
It will be good, Vikas, if I can see your face also, because then it will be interactive. Otherwise, it looks like I'm talking to a wall. Good to see you after a long time.
Good to see you, ma'am, also, and thank you for your session. It was very insightful and enriching. Ma'am, actually, one question from the session that you took was that you said thesis can have a hypothesis or we have the research questions. So hypothesis is assumption where the relation between two different things are being established. Whereas in case of a research question, which is more for a qualitative research, does it mean that the research
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You were audible earlier, Vikas.
Hello?
Yeah, now you are audible.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I want to ask whether from your this two comparison between a qualitative research where we have a research questions or a hypothesis based research, does it mean the research may have either the hypothesis based one or the research questions where a qualitative aspect is being tested or researched?
I think that you missed that particular part where I was talking about, and I explicitly mentioned it is not necessarily that every research should have a hypothesis. And also, it is not necessarily that every research which has a hypothesis may have a research question. At the same time, there are scenarios where you may have a hypothesis also and a research question also, which together may give rise to the conclusion. And mostly, hypothesis is used when you are doing the correlation-based research. So where you are trying to establish, for example, in your research, if I talk about, you are talking about the real estate, the evaluation of the open green spaces with respect to if I remember correctly, it is all about how the real estate prices are getting impacted with respect to the existence of the open green spaces. Your thesis talks something
ma'am.
about
Yes,
this
ma'am.
only. So it's a good example to have an hypothesis, and I'm sure you must have built an hypothesis based on your literature studies, where you are trying to build a correlation, a positive correlation between, yes, the real estate prices increase with respect to having the existence of open green spaces in the proximity. Now, this is the hypothesis which you have created with respect to your research question. Now, if with respect to your research, now if I want to adopt a pragmatic approach, if I talk about those paradigms of the research, which talks about objectivity, subjectivity. So the approach which you have initially mentioned with respect to hypothesis is objective. That is, a correlation exists, and that correlation will be the fact or one truth only for everyone when investigated in the same settings with the same set. Now, I want to go one step ahead in your PhD research. I want to understand how the people's mindset is getting impacted with respect to those open spaces. Here, I create certain research questions. So now my research becomes a research which is pragmatic or transactional with respect to the patterns we have talked about. It is not just quantitative, it is not only qualitative, it's a mix of two things. So when we bring these two things together, if you remember when I was talking about the transactional, I said giving rise to new knowledge. I become the part of the ecosystem by adopting that research question to indulge into the open inquiries, which I may have arrived at based on certain other research papers talking about the pricing in the real estate with respect to the open areas, which have not been quantified in nature, but yes, qualitative in nature with respect to investigating the different other aspects. So it is not necessary. It is again the situation in which I situate my research. There are three things when we talk about the research. One is the theoretical framework, the other is the methodological framework, and the third is the conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is the framework of the researcher, which sits between the theoretical and the methodological. So it is your conceptual framework which actually helps you decide. That is why I said you should never start looking into the kind of research methods you will use, the kind of research data which you will start collecting. Don't define that based on the literature review. It is important for you first to create that research framework, which is different from the research methodology and the research methods that we talk about.
Thank you.
I hope I'm able to give some clarity to you, Vikas, using your own thesis, because I happen to be your co-guide. So I was aware of your research. So I thought it will be best for me to help you understand with that particular perspective only. Is it somebody trying to show me anything? Because there is this white paper or the something which is there in front of the screen.
Ma'am, there's a technical glitch, so we're trying to fix that. Just 2 minutes, please.
Okay. So it's good to see the old people, old faces, little nostalgic, but happy to see how you people are growing.
Same here, ma'am. Good to see you too.
Always a pleasure, ma'am. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I also had one more question, if time allows. I was very intrigued with the fact when I was seeing your presentation about how architectural knowledge has, historically emerged through, embodied craft, intuitions, and practices, which was generally, often we see it is transferred via apprenticeship rather than actually, more concrete evidence-based transfer of data. So, how does that in the contemporary, how does that as a contemporary demand in today's research quantify in terms of a measurable and data-driven research, not also, marginalizing different forms of knowledge in the way that it may not be quantified at one point of time? I just wanted to know how this kind of data transfer in terms of embodied craft, apprenticeship can be quantified in today's contemporary demand of a data-driven research.
You look into one document which has been created by AHRC. AHRC is Arts and Humanities Review Committee in UK. So 2008, it's a question which has already been answered, because that is the challenge the architectural field has always been facing. When we talk about good architecture, for example, if we talk about the architecture of the Laurie Baker, or for that matter, if you talk about the architecture of the B.V. Doshi. So these are two icons in the Indian architectural landscape, if we see. But the question when it comes to giving them the PhD doctorate with respect to the kind of work which they have done, how do we scientifically summarize that as a PhD work? So that challenge has always been existing. But I will be very candid with you, Lavaditya, that during this, when I was doing the research with respect to how to go back to the history and understand how the research has been done, I came across this committee paper, AHRC Committee 2008, which lists down 3 parameters with respect to giving the PhD doctorate stature to any of the good architectural work which has been done by any of the practitioners. So the 3 aspects which they talk about is that it should not just be a knowledge which has been created, it should be a new knowledge which has been created. That is, it should not be a marvelous building, but that building should have some knowledge with respect to imparting to the other practitioner. For example, if we talk about the Zaha Hadid, the mention of which came in the earlier session, Zaha Hadid had talked about why look into one angle only when there are 360-degree angles. So it's a very powerful statement which she has been able to create authenticity by her own work. So if anybody documents that work with respect to all those angles, 360 angles that we have been talking about, so it becomes a document which has been captured in a very systematic way and which can be communicated. It has a new knowledge which it is giving, that is the geometry. Okay. That is, the different angles can be used to create a marvelous architecture. But it is not just a masterpiece. That system has been documented in a very systematic way, the whole process of making the building. That is one thing this AHRC committee talks about. The second thing which AHRC committee talks about is that it should be able to be communicated to the new. The building has been made. Nothing, it is of no value to the others if others don't know how to learn from the structure of that building and how to use that structural methodology for the better advantage of the other or the broader field. That is the implication that we talk about. And the third, of course, is is it replicable, and also can anybody do a critical scrutiny of this? I can do a critical scrutiny of any building if I know what has gone into the making of that whole structure. So that documentation process, it makes important for any building. That is why we always say, I say always to my students and my faculty, the number of hours that we are spending in these studios, they are not waste. We are indulging into every step of the research. The only thing that we are failing is we are not documenting it. So when the question comes, do we research? Yes, architects are always researching. The only thing that we don't do is that we do not document.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
any building, any architect is creating, and if he has that feeling that he is bringing some new innovation with respect to technology, with respect to thermal energy, with respect to the facade, the only thing that we need to do is that document every step that you have done.
Right, ma'am. Right.
I hope I'm able to give some. Your question was very complicated. It took me some time to do the postmortem of that question, but then I realized that it relates to how a practice-led project can be brought to a stature of being a PhD work, if I understood it clearly.
Definitely, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time.
Thank
Today's
you.
session for all the participants, I'm sure, has certainly laid a very strong foundation for all participants and the approach in a more focused and a systematic manner. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and all the best for the coming days. I'm sure there will be a lot of new revelations, and I have just set the stage. And many of these speakers in the coming session will be actually talking in depth about the different things which I spoke to you all today. All the best to all of you. Thank you, Snigdha. I can't hear you, Snigdha.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I can't hear you clearly. What did she say?
She said thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So much. Thank you so much, everybody. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
For all the participants who've joined offline and online, we will now break for 30 minutes. And I would request them to kindly rejoin on time for the second session of day 1 at 2:20 p.m. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone, to the second session of day 1 of this faculty development program called Blueprints to Breakthrough: Research Methods and Techniques in Architecture, organized by Amity School of Architecture and Planning, Noida. It is now my privilege to introduce our next distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Krishna Kumar Dhote, Dean, Maulana Azad National Institute of Technology, Manit Bhopal, an eminent academician, urbanist, and researcher with nearly 3 decades of experience in architectural education, planning, and institutional leadership. Sir has made significant contributions in the domains of architecture, urban research, and academic development, and continues to guide research and policy initiatives at the national level. Today, Sir will be delivering an insightful session on research design, emerging technologies in research, components and characteristics of technical writing, and research ethics and academic integrity in architecture. Some topics that are extremely relevant in strengthening the quality and credibility of contemporary architectural research. I would now like to invite Sir to kindly address the participants and commence the session. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Very good afternoon. Very good afternoon. Whether my screen is visible?
So we are able to see you, but we're not able to see any presentation.
Now, is the presentation visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So very good afternoon, one and all. This is really a pleasure to interact with young researchers and faculty members who are very rich in their experience. And it is not like delivering a lecture, rather interacting with you to understand
the new ongoing things. So, as you have very well said that this is an faculty development program on blueprint to breakthrough research methods and techniques in architecture. Well, when we talk about architecture, every project, every intervention that we come across as an architect is research in itself. But now, looking at the demand of industry, looking at the demand specifically, particularly of the academia, we need to enter into a domain of formal research, isn't it? Now it has become a mandatory requirement. And not only this, when you see that lot of transformation, lot of development is taking place, so definitely looking at the kind of scenario which our profession is facing, I think it is of utmost importance to indulge into research activities. So it is my pleasure to address you people. Now, what exactly we will be talking today or in this particular lecture is, I will be talking about what exactly a research design is. Okay. And then maybe with the help of a very small example of the research which I am conducting right now, I will be able to uh, give you some insight on how to use the emerging technologies in research, and also what should be the direction of research specifically in the field of architecture. Now, before we start, we need to understand that what exactly this research is and what should be the outcome of this research. Okay, so this is one article which says that we should train PhD students to be thinkers and not just specialists. Because nowadays, when I came across so many PhDs, so many research scholars, so many research articles, what I understand is people are more interested in conducting a stereotype of research wherein there are certain led norms, and then whether it is the research which has been conducted or which is being conducted is useful for profession or not, we need to really think about it. So with this background, let us start that what exactly research design is. So essentially, whenever we talk about a research project, may it be a sponsored project from some government agency, may it be a research grant from your own university, or even if it is a research proposal for some kind of award of a master's or doctoral or postdoctoral degree. So there is essentially a difference between a research proposal and a research design. When we talk about research proposal, it is basically a proposal which has been submitted to some agency either for grant of funds or for getting the approval of that particular research to be conducted in that institute or in that particular lab. Where is the research design? Research design is the utmost important part of any research project. The reason being, research design is for the researcher. Like if I have to conduct a research, I have to have my own research design. So in that way, for a successful research project or for a project in which we want to have the fruitful results, not only in terms of publications, not only in terms of patents, but what exactly we will be delivering to the society. So it has to be outcome based. So for that, proper research design is a must. Now, when we talk about research design, we are specifically talking about first thing is to decide upon the title, then to define the research problem. Then from the research problem, we may frame few research questions with the purpose that what exactly is the purpose of that particular research. And then there are two specific things which are research strategies, like which research strategy has to be adopted under what condition. So I will be more focusing on research strategies today. And then there are developed concepts, developed models, theories, hypotheses, which we rely upon. And then there are different data type of sources, data collection, data reduction, analysis, and also we mentioned the problem and limitation. Now, let us understand what exactly is the element of social research, because we should understand and appreciate this particular fact that architecture is not only specifically focusing on the technology or the science part, the social part is equally important. So I consider this particular thing largely that architecture falls in the domain of social research. So what exactly are the elements of a good research design? As I said, the very first thing is we need to understand the research topic and the problem. Now, this research topic it may be a very basic thing or it can be applied research. Nowadays, we will find more instances of applied research where in certain theories, certain techniques, certain tools had been applied, and we want to understand those, and by using them, we want to solve our problems. Then coming to the research questions. So there are three basic research questions: what is happening, why it is happening, and how it is happening. Okay, and accordingly, we can put our researchers' stance. Now, there are two different type of research strategies. One can be top-down, like wherein there are certain theories, there are certain models, and then we try to identify ourselves in those stances and then try to fulfill our research requirement. And another is bottom-up. So largely, there are four research strategies: inductive, deductive, retroductive, and abductive. So we will be discussing all these four research strategies in detail. Apart from that, there are certain ontological and epistemological assumptions which will depend upon the context, under which context this particular research is carried out. And as I said, that there are developed theories, developed concepts, and on the basis of which we may adopt certain hypotheses. And then there are different data sources. These data sources may be primary, secondary, or tertiary, depending upon the situation, and how to do the analysis and other things. So the focus for this particular lecture is on understanding the different research strategies. Now let us try to understand what are these four different research strategies. So before we start conducting our research, we need to have a clarity in our own role, like what exactly I am going to do in this particular research. So what will be my instance? Whether I am going to be a detached observer, that there are certain things which and in which I am not involved as, and I'm just observing them as a spectator, or we have to change our role and look at the scenario as an empathetic observer, where we are able to place ourselves as a social actor and then grasp the subjectivity of the particular subject. Or I am a faithful reporter, that whatever is happening in the field, I am not getting involved into it, and then I am reporting the same in the form of my research report or outcome. Also, we can act like a mediator, like we understand certain things, we have a knowledge of certain thing, and then we are trying to understand that particular social phenomena and then bring it before the society. Or again, moving one particular step ahead, where we are there as a reflective partner. It means we associate ourselves with the critical theory and then try to empathicate the same thing from the participant's perspective. Or we can even be a dialogic facilitator, wherein some things are happening and we are able to produce a kind of documentary in the form of a report, in the form of outcomes to the society. So before we start with the research questions, we need to understand what we are trying to do. Are we trying to explore certain thing, that what might happen, which people, which section of people is involved, or we are going to describe something, what is happening, again, what kind of people are involved in that, or we are trying to understand that why it is happening, or also we are trying to give reason, that we are explaining why it is happening, or we are predicting certain things, we are forecasting that what is likely to happen, or we are going to gauge the change, that what has changed, what was there and now what it is, or we are evaluating certain thing, that something has happened, something has changed, whether it is good or bad, we are doing our evaluation, or something has taken place, something has taken shape, and what is the long term impact of this. So these are the different roles where we can put in ourselves, and then we can discuss and decide about what kind of research strategy has to be adopted. Now, once we have some kind of clarity, or once we have framed the research questions, there are 4 different strategies, and it is not like that we have to adopt a strategy A or B or C or D. There might be different components of research where we might be applying the combinations. Sometimes it may be inductive, sometimes it may be retroductive, sometimes it may be some other research strategy. So before going ahead, let us try to understand what are these different strategies. So first strategy is inductive research strategy. Now, what exactly this research strategy is? So, research strategy, it is a logic, or it is a set of procedure for answering the different research questions. Specifically, the question when we say why, and again the question what is what. So, starting with inductive research study, the inductive research study will start with collection of data. Like we have collected certain data about a particular phenomena, and then we derive some generalizations. We derive certain generalization by simply using the inductive logic. The aim of inductive research strategy is to describe a social characteristic or the nature of regularities that are happening, or the network of regularities in the social life. So, inductive research strategy specifically answer the question what, and its capacity is limited to answer the question what. Now, what kind of description or social phenomena or what kind of generalization is required? So, for generalization, there can be identification of different patterns. Like in a society, there are different economical sections. In a society, there are different community groups. In a society, there are different social groups which behave in a certain manner. Now, by observing them, we can put them under some generalization that this particular thing is being done by them, or this particular community is engaged only and only in business, or this particular community or part of society is engaged into such activities. So there are certain descriptions which can be very well derived out of the inductive research strategy. Then the inductive research strategy is a tool which is now used for answering what. Okay. The kind of descriptions which are produced here are quantitative in nature. There is no qualitative data. Largely it is quantitative in nature. Okay. And then we need to understand what are the characteristics which are to be studied, what are their definitions, and how they can be measured. What can be the unit of measurement that for that particular thing. So what exactly is the purpose of this particular inductive research strategy? The aim is to establish a description of characteristics and pattern. What kind of ontological, epistemological assumptions are there? They are depth or subtle realist. How to start? It starts with collection of data, and then how does it finish? We have to check with that whether it relates to our research question or not. Now, for example, to understand this inductive research, let us talk about the juvenile delinquency, that we know that one particular age group which is engaged into crime. Now, what may be the reason? What kind of young people engage in juvenile crime? So, we have to do some kind of generalization. This generalization will give the description. Now, what exactly are the characteristics? When we talk about that particular juvenile who is involved in some criminal activity, let us try to find out what kind of education he is getting into, whether he's in private school, whether he's in government school, whether it is in state board, whether he is a student of CBSE or ICSE, what age group he falls into, from 10 to 12 years or 12 to 15 or 15 to 17 years, and so on. Again, these are the characteristics which we can collect for the individual. Now, second thing would be to collect the information for their families. Now, let us try to find out what are the income, what in which income group their family falls into. Then again, there can be groups between 20,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh, or less than 20,000. Also, we can have information about their social structure in terms of their religious belief, their caste, their native place from where they are. And one important thing which we can find out is whether they live in a joint family, whether they live in a nuclear family, whether they live in a broken family. Okay. Now, then we find out, or there can be a generalization on the basis of data, that those who are living in broken family, or those who are having broken families, are indulged into this particular activity. So we can have some kind of generalization based on the data. Now let us talk about the second research strategy. Now we are trying to understand, what we have seen is that there is a generalization, there is a particular section of age group in which people are engaged into crime, and then we have generalized that because of some particular peculiarity of their family structure, which is most of them belong to broken homes, are engaged into this. This is one thing which we have find out from the deduction. Sorry. Now the next is deductive research strategy. Now deductive research strategy will try to understand the why question, that why this is happening. Now it is concerned with explaining some social regularity that has not been discovered and which are also not understood. Now we have to find out or formulate a possible explanation. Now we need to find out some possible explanation based on which we can have a theoretical argument. Okay. This again we will see with the help of example how it can be done. Now, what is the task of this deductive research strategy? The deductive research strategy is going to test a theory. Like on the basis of certain description, we have fabricated a theoretical argument, and that theoretical argument need to be tested by the deductive research strategy. This can be done with the knowledge of social world in advance by means of trial and error process. Now we are trying to understand an explanation or an association between two different concepts, either by proposing a theory and then by checking it. So the association can be established by inductive research strategy, as we have done in the previous case, and the description can be provided by using the abductive research strategy, which we will be studying soon. Okay. Now, what are the different steps involved in any deductive strategy? The first thing is we have to take help of any tentative data. By conjecting them, we are trying to formulate a hypothesis, or there can be a set of hypothesis 1, 2, 3. With this help, and then also with previously accepted hypothesis, it is quite possible that there might be researcher who might have done some work in the relevant area in which you are trying to work, and then deduce to a conclusion or a number of different conclusions. Okay. So examining these conclusions and the logic of argument that produce them is the task of deductive research strategy. So once satisfied with this examination, the following steps are to be taken. What is this? That test the conclusion by gathering appropriate data, again make necessary observations or conduct the necessary experiments. If test fails, then what does it mean? The data are not consistent with the conclusion. The theory must be false, or whatever assumptions we have taken in hypothesis may not be true. And if it passes the test and the data are consistent with it, it means the theory is temporarily supported and it need to be corroborated further if not proven to be true. So the important point in this theory has to be invented or borrowed and expressed as deductive argument. So it essentially, there has to be some previous work which has been done, or there is parallel work which is going on by different researchers to explain that. Now again, coming back to the same example, we had seen that among the young people in the particular age group in different social structures, broken home is one responsible factor for indulgence of young people into crime. Now, these broken homes when we try to deduce this particular thing, broken homes means single parents. Now, what can be the reason of single parenting? So either it can be a death of one parent, or it can be because of divorce of the parents, or they are living apart for some reason. So there are two theoretical concepts which we can have, maybe because of death of one of either parent or divorce. So this can be two different reasons which we can identify. Now, how to deduce this? Like, what exactly happens when there is a single parent? So broken homes means it leads to inadequate socialization. Why this inadequate socialization is there? Because there is lack of socializing agent. Now, what is the socializing agent? So here we consider the parent as an authority figure or their role model. Like if you look at the teenagers, if you look at the young people, either there has to be some authority figure. Well, most of time there will be father or mother which is taking care of them, which is authority figure for them, or they are the role models for them. So what we are trying to deduce from this is that there was inadequate socialization, and then there was susceptibility to deviant peer group influence. Like the peer group is their own group in which they are living. Because of this lack of socialization, there is, we can say, dominance of the peer group, which is leading them to juvenile delinquency. So what is the theory which we concluded here is that the broken homes are the reason for juvenile delinquency. So this is how this deductive research strategy works. So to summarize, we can say that deductive strategy is to be seen as producing explanations which are tentative, because what we have worked out may not be true, but this is an observation, and from certain explanations we are deducing this particular theory that broken homes are the reason for juvenile delinquency. But here we have not tried to identify or search for the truth. We are depending on certain explanations which we have deduced from certain observed phenomena. Okay. So again, what is deductive research strategy? The aim is to test theory and to eliminate false one and to corroborate the surviving theory. Okay. What are the ontological assumption, epistemological assumption? That it becomes, again, it is relying on the subtle realist or the conventionalism. How to start? To start, we have to identify a regularity, and then we have to identify, or we have to explain those regularities, why it is happening again and again. And on the basis of that, we have to construct a theory and then reduce it to hypothesis. How it will finish? By testing the hypothesis. Now, after this inductive and deductive, there is a third theory, which is retroductive research strategy. Now, what is retroductive research strategy? It starts with observed regularity, but it try to seek a different type of explanation. It will again start with the, similarly as we had done in the previous two cases, that it will start with the observed regularity, but here we have to identify, or we have to seek a different type of explanation. Now these explanations are either achieved by locating the reality or by locating the structure, underlying structure or mechanism. So here we are trying to understand the mechanism, which may not be directly observable. It may not be visible to you, but definitely there is something happening. What exactly this is, let us try to understand this. So the very first stage is to provide adequate description of regularity which is happening. Again, as we have done in case of deductive strategy, this stage will require use of either inductive or abductive research strategy also as well. Okay. Then the central problem of the retroductive research strategy is how to discover the structures and mechanism that are proposed to explain the observed regularities. So it is a general agreement that it requires disciplined scientific thinking aided by creative imagination, intuition, and guesswork. So here your role as a researcher becomes more important, because here you have to do this scientific thinking, which can further be aided by creative imagination, intuition, and guesswork. Now, how this is happening? Okay. So there are certain observed regularities. which are happening in a given context, and then there is some mechanism which is resulting into some kind of outcome. Now, the peer group influence in case of juvenile delinquency, the influence of peer group, we are calling it as a mechanism. That is the mechanism which is working. Regularity, type of family. Type of family, what we have seen is broken homes. So that is the regularity in which there is some kind of phenomena which is happening, and that phenomena is nothing but the influence of peer group. And what is the context here? The context here is we are talking the larger context of socialization. Okay. And what is the outcome? The outcome is because of that peer group, we have the outcome in terms of juvenile delinquency. So this is how the retroactive research study try to identify the phenomena or the mechanism. So this is the explanatory model given by Powson, where it talks about how this regularity is observed, how mechanism is working, what is the context and what is the outcome. So to summarize the retroactive research study, we can say to explain the observed phenomena and the regularities that obtain between them, social scientists must attempt to discover appropriate mechanism and the context in which they operate. So here the understanding of mechanism and the defining the context is equally important. So if we have hypothesis or hypothetical description of such social phenomena, these are to be tested. If these tests are successful, this gives a good reason to believe the relevance of the context and the mechanism. So if by some means I can validate this, that in broken homes there is influence of peers on the juveniles, and as a result the outcome is juvenile delinquency in the context of socialization, then this thing will be taken further or that thing will be accepted. So the aim was to discover underlying mechanism to explain the observed regularities. The ontological assumptions are again realist and neorealism. How to start, document and model a regularity and motives, then describe the context and possible mechanisms, and then finally we will establish these mechanisms which provides the best. Then the last strategy out of the four is abductive research strategy. Now it is abductive research study is slightly different from the rest of the three strategies, where we have the answer of why, what, and study of the phenomena. In the abductive research strategy, it has a very different logic to other three strategies. Its starting point is to investigate the social world of social actors. You see, if we look at the scenario of election in India, when we talk about the results of the recent assembly elections, specifically the results of Tamil Nadu, I don't want to go into controversy, I'm just giving an example, wherein there are every state is having some kind of what you call it as incumbency factor, or there will be some kind of political agenda in terms of announcement of freebies and other thing, which actually become the deciding criteria for the voters whom to vote. Largely it is like that. But when we look at the south, there are certain factors, specifically talking about Tamil Nadu, wherein there is a lot of influence of film stars, isn't it? Now, as we understand, politics is very different from films. Politics is very different from this silver screen. But what you see is the influence, one particular influence, whosoever it may be, that it has influenced the entire population. So if you look at it logically, silver screen has nothing to do with the political leadership, but then it is acting like it is a phenomena which is happening, and it is not the recent one. It is happening since ages, isn't it? So there are certain things where there is a very different logic to understand, isn't it? So what exactly this is? So, but it is a social reality. It is a social world which is being conceptualized in a particular scenario. isn't it? Now, here the task of researcher becomes very important and very difficult also to understand this particular order and to discover the motive and meaning of what is happening as a social activity, isn't it? Simply by fan following, if you can change certain things, so it is a very difficult thing to understand. So even in day-to-day problems, we may encounter such problems in research as well. Okay, now here the researcher has to enter into their world to understand and then try to find out the order or what was the motive or what is the meaning of this whatever is happening in that particular society. So this social scientific typification provide an understanding of the activities, and may them become ingredients in more systematic explanatory account. So in that way, abductive research strategy is very, very different from rest of the three uh, strategies. Okay. So this abductive research strategy, it incorporates inductive as well as deductive research strategy, wherein it ignores the meaning and interpretation or the motive and intentions. Sometimes we may not be able to generalize or try to find the answer of what, how, or why it is happening. Okay. So here the social scientists need to provide an insider view. As I have given in starting that we can be a detached observer, we can be a faithful reporter. So here you have to take an instance where you are the insider view. Like you have to understand, you have to be part of that particular society, you need to understand the motive, and then you need to give us the explanation. So this strategy adopts a bottom-up approach, like how the things have built up rather than a top-down approach where you have a hypothesis and then you prove it or disapprove it. Okay. So in abductive research strategy, it presents a description to understand and which reflects a social actor's point of view rather than adopting entirely the researcher's point of view. So that is the basic difference where we need to understand when we are talking about the abductive research strategy. Now again, with the same example, let us try to understand. So what has happened? So what kind of young people engaged? This was answered by inductive strategy. But why this juvenile delinquency is related to broken homes only can be understood and explained very well by the abductive strategy. Again, when we talk about the juvenile delinquency, why it has happened, this was up to some extent given by generalization with the inductive strategy, but finally it is the abductive strategy which will give you the answer. So what exactly abductive research strategy is? Answer not in terms of causal relationship, which we do most of the time, where we try to understand and establish causal relationship, but it should be in based on how these young people see themselves in their social world. If I talk about this specific example, so here rather than finding out the generalization, rather than making the observations, we should try to indulge with them and try to understand why they are doing so. So to conclude about this abductive research strategy, what is the aim of this abductive research study? It is to describe and understand social life in terms of social actors, meanings, and motives. Again, the epistemological and ontological assumptions are same, the realist and constructivism. How it starts? It starts with discovering everyday concepts, meanings, and then later produces a technical account for the layout accounts. And how it will end? It will end by developing a theory that will elaborate it iteratively, repeatedly. Okay. Now, after understanding this 1, 2, 3, 4 different strategies, let us see how to implement these strategies specifically in our own area, that is architecture and planning. So there are certain different research paradigms which exist. Largely, we talk about there are 4 different classical research paradigms. The first is positivism, which says that yes, we can whatever we can observe, we can study by human senses, that there are certain realities which exist in world which can be understood by us and which can be observed by us, and then later we can draw a certain conclusion. Second talks about rationalism, critical rationalism. It rejects that sensory experiences, like what we observe is the secure foundation for making scientific theories, but there are some pure observations are very hard and difficult to make them understand, because as a person, as a researcher, as a human being, we will always have some prejudice. So there is a critical rationalism of that. Then there is a classical theory which says that we can discover certain things by ancient text through number of phrases which are developed in alternative positions. So by understanding all this long prehistoric and historic different testimonies, we can understand and interpret the things. We can understand the thing. Last one talks about interpretivism, where social reality is interpreted in many ways. Okay, and then we need to understand then in what exactly is the context and how do you want to understand. So these are the research paradigms. Now, specifically talking about the research strategies, again coming back to the different elements of social research design, we started that there has to be a research topic which will be either basic in nature or it will largely depending upon the applied research. Then on the basis of that, we will frame certain research questions depending upon the purpose, whether we want to explore, whether we want to describe, whether we want to understand, whether we want to make some predictions, whether we want to evaluate certain changes which has taken place, or we are going to make some impact assessments. Again, strategies you had seen, it can be either top down or bottom up, or both the ways which we have to adopt. And specifically, we discussed about inductive, deductive, retroductive, and abductive research strategies. Now, there are different concepts, theories, hypotheses, and models. Established concepts, theories, and models by different researchers throughout the ages. So that can be taken as a base, and then further either there can be an antithesis or it can corroborate with the results. Okay. Again, data type, form, sources, again analysis, and then coming down to the different methods. Okay. Now, when we specifically talk about architecture, let us try to explore and see how this particular research can be adopted and conducted in specifically in the field of architecture. So architecture is, as I said early when I started my lecture, that architecture cannot be treated as a pure science, or also it could not be, it is not independent of science. It is not purely a social research. So here we need to understand the architectural research is distinctive because it will combine both qualitative, quantitative, visual, spatial, technical, and practice-based methods in a single study. You see, whenever we design a building, even designing a building in itself is a research project, whether you accept it or not, but it is an research project. So what are the different domains where we can work into? Very first thing is there are number of policies, so there can be policies linked inquiries. Again, urban system. When I say urban system, there are n number of opportunities. There are different kind of systems within the urban. So it's a very broad umbrella. Then building design, specifically in the time which we are facing, where a lot of technological changes are happening, not only in terms of services, not only in terms of building materials, not only in terms of construction technology, but also in terms of the way buildings will be used. Okay, then heritage is one important aspect. There is lot of opportunities in terms of material. Again, in the era of climate change, when we are talking about sustainability, whether it is SDG 11, whether it is SDG 13, the climatic responsiveness, it becomes a very important aspect of architectural research nowadays. Housing, spatial behavior. So these are certain areas which I have identified, but these are broad umbrellas. And as I said, then research design in architecture is a logic that will connect problem, questions, methods, and then evidences or data collection and analysis and conclusions. So we can think of different type of researchers. I had already explained, and then there can be different architectural methods. Okay, so most of the time our methods are we can adopt like a social researcher, we can adopt like a scientific researcher. So there is again a combination of methods which we have to use for. And then there is no limit whether we are working at a micro level at building, we are working at certain neighborhood levels, streets, we are working for policies, we are working at settlement level, we are working across different social groups, and so on. So there is a wide array of research in architecture. Now, when we specifically want to discuss about the different tools, so what I have observed nowadays is many of researcher, you might be on different social groups, you can see that every day or every next day you will get some WhatsApp message that I am conducting a research on this and this topic, please spare some time. And there will be one Google Scholar form, or Google form having 40-50 questions, and then they call it as expert opinion or expert survey. Okay, they collect from us, all of us, we all are indulgent to this. I don't say that it is not a good practice, but then you see the kind of data which they are collecting and the kind of results they are drawing from it. So here I want to put a word of caution before you that we are now having very efficient tools wherein we can have a very bigger palette from where which we can choose the data, from where we can select the data. Now, what are the different emerging technologies which can very well be used in this? The very first thing is AI tools. Nowadays, if you look at the young researchers, they do a very amazing bibliometric analysis. Like when you ask them to present their literature review, they have different kind of visuals. In a particular research, urban heat island appeared 3,422 times. I have evaluated 400 research papers. I have gone through 600 research papers of Scopus, 300 papers of SCI, and this of Elsevier, and this much of Springer, and so on. So uh, the thing which we need to appreciate here is I was talking about the palette. You look that what number of research paper one particular researcher is now able to go through. He is not going through each and every paper one by one, but then there are tools available. So this is how we need to understand where is the utility of AI tools and how they are to be used. So this is one area of literature mapping where I see that the emerging technology can help us when we do this different kind of bibliometric analysis, which also gives you a picture of geographical distribution, that in which country, which researcher is happening, where urban heat island is studied more, whether it is in US, whether it is in UK, whether it is in South Asia. This is one thing wherein you can have a very good literature mapping. Second thing is nowadays, even if you ask a third semester or fourth semester student to take a Google Earth image and trace it down a CAD map with roads or buildings, they are able to write codes in Python and they are able to extract the road layout. They are able to extract the building footprint. They are able to extract the vegetation. So this is the again next area where we need to indulge into to understand what are the different potentials of different languages like Python writing the coding. That it is not at all necessary for a person like me to understand and write down the codes. But definitely I can always take help of another maybe young students or another people who know how to write the codes and other thing. This is the next thing. Also, there are a lot of I should say, tools which are available, which help you in editing. Like they can do referencing for you, they can improve your grammar, they can put your things in a very good form of visuals. So that is another thing. Again, when I was talking about this image extraction, data extraction using the different images, so there is this image classification can also be done with the help of AI tools. We need to find out the appropriate tools. And also AI is helpful in giving you different ideas. You can very well articulate your research ideas. Like you might be having 3 to 4 different ideas, but to put them in a very structured manner, AI tools are very important. So when we say emerging technologies in research, I think all the young researchers or even the one who are engaged into research, who have already done their doctoral research and now supervising or indulge into some research projects or even in consultancy, they should be make themselves familiar with this different AI tools. They should understand the potential of these AI tools and implement them into their practice. Second thing is GIS and remote sensing. Again, in spatial analysis, when I was talking about urban systems, this is a very useful tool wherein you can understand and predict the land use changes. You can appreciate land use changes. You can appreciate land use, land cover. You can predict. You can study. You can measure the urban expansion. Then Hit Island, I have already talked about. Similarly, there is lot of potential for different kind of environmental analysis when we talk in terms of blue-green infrastructure, where we talk in terms of shrinking of water bodies, where we talk in terms of afforestation, wherein we talking about increasing building densities. Okay. One more tool which I think nowadays is very important for architects is BIM. And the second emerging technology is the digital twin, wherein you can have a dashboard by employing certain sensors in a real life situation, and you can monitor the operation of building, you can monitor the operation of city. So this again, we need to understand the potential of this two very powerful tool of BIM and digital twin. Also, a lot of advancement is there in visualization platforms. Nowadays, we all are experiencing this. Our final year students, when they come along with their proposals, they come with that set, and then you can have go through the building virtually, virtual reality. So these are the things which are increasing our learning, experiential learning. They are, I should say, enhancing the values. So there are so many visualizing platform, maybe in terms of dashboards wherein you get the real-time data, maybe in terms of different network maps wherein you can have different layers of information superimposed with the spatial layers. So spatial analytics is become easier, and we have evidence rich presentations of findings. Nowadays, with the help of social media, people are able to understand and appreciate the concentration of people on certain picnic spots or certain pilgrimage spots or certain tourism spots. So a lot of things are happening, and then they can be very much helpful to us. So this visualization platform, particularly, specifically the architects, they are very like they understand things visually better as compared to any other thing. Okay. Then this tool like LIDAR, 3D scanning, specifically those who are working in the area of heritage documentation. So now people do this heritage documentation of heritage structures with the help of drone and LIDARs at different angles, different positions, and now they are able to make it a 3D model, do the 3D printing. So such advancements are happening in our field, and we need to be familiar with this, and we need to understand and appreciate. Recently, I came across one. It is not exactly 3D printing, but in certain way, it is very much like 3D printing, where the real life simulation is done with the help of modeling with sand. And there they do this modeling for dams, and then they try to understand under what condition this dam is going to fail, and what will be the scenario once this particular dam fails. So there are so many technologies when we say digital twin, BIM, or using this LiDAR, 3D scanning, and other things. Then another important aspect is sensors and IoT, which can very well be used for environmental science to understand the indoor comfort, the occupancy, the usage of energy, and it can very well be linked with the behavior of man with the environmental measurements. The only word of caution which I want to put here is that let us use these tools only for the purpose of acceleration. Only for the purpose of acceleration. They are the tools, they are not the masters. Okay, so let us first go through this, then try to understand, and until and unless we have not done with the ground truthing, we should not go for the unverified claims or invented citations or outsourced judgment. So that is the word of caution which is there. So this is how these emerging technologies can help us. Now, if you allow me, I would like to explain with the help of one example. Like I have submitted one research proposal, rather I am working on this particular proposal. So this particular proposal is about river sensitive sanitation, where there is a longitudinal study. Longitudinal study means the time period is 5 years. So in this particular study, what we are going to do is, this is sponsored by ICSSR New Delhi. It's a project of 1.25 CR in which I am the PI. And I have my colleagues, Dr. Navneet Munot, Dr. Preeti Onkar from Manit, and two more colleagues from IIPA and one from Department of Urban Administration, Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so here I want to discuss the research strategies or the research design, which I initially started by taking a very silly example. Now let us come to an example which is very much relevant to our field. So if you allow me, I will be happy to share this with you. Can I go ahead with this? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are very much audible. Please continue.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Okay, so I was talking about my proposal, which is about this. It's a longitudinal study wherein we are trying to understand that there are different settlements along the river. There are almost 21 urban settlements, and all are very small except one Jabalpur city. And then another is Hoshangabad or Narmadapuram with a population of 2 lakh. Otherwise, most of the settlements, the 21 settlements, are having population in thousands. Okay. So, in this, we are trying to understand that what is the sanitation, what kind of sanitation facility is there. There is some disturbance. Can someone please check how to? How this particular sanitation of these cities is impacting, having impact on river health, and how the community which is living in this particular settlements is impacted by the health of river. So it's a mixed study. So when I see this particular study, it's a longitudinal. It will have a mixed method, but why it is mixed method? Because there are two set of data. One is qualitative, which will be the qualitative data is we have to talk about the different parameters of water health, river health in terms of BOD, COD, pH scale, solid waste, and so many things. And at the same time, there is impact on community, which may be very qualitative in nature. So quantitative is there, qualitative is there. Then it is again longitudinal design. Why it is longitudinal design? Because we will be collecting the data for 5 consecutive years, and then we will be comparing the data of different years for different locations. Then What will be the unit of analysis? So there are different scales. The macro scale is the entire river length. Okay. Then again, coming to micro, as compared to this, there are different settlements which are at different locations. So those are point data. And within the settlement, we are again going to micro level, where we will be doing the household or community level data, where we'll be talking about the individual residents. Okay. So in that way, it is a multi-scalar. It is a multi-scalar project. So it is longitudinal, it is exploratory in nature, it is multidimensional in terms of we are having different set of data. Different set of data means we will be talking about the sanitation infrastructure, we will be talking about the health infrastructure, we will be talking about the health of the persons, we will be talking about the health of the river. Okay. Now, I would like to specifically show you few results of our the preliminary study which we have conducted. So this study is, before I start with this particular study, I have drawn certain conclusions from this study with respect to IKS, Indian Knowledge System, which is part of the big study. It is not essentially the aim of the study, but it is a small part of it. So I'm going to explain it here. Now, before I start this, I always want to put this particular quote that whenever we talk about architecture, whenever we are talking about urban planning, when we are talking about social sciences, there is one thing which we need to understand, and that is change, which is constant in life. So this is a famous quote, though this may not be relevant here, but I always put this particular quote of Louis Mumford in my every presentation, which says that city is a theater of social action. City is not about road infrastructure. City is not about sewer lines. City is not about buildings. Rather, city is a theater of social action where everything else, which includes art, politics, education, makes that particular social drama more significant. Okay. Now, to understand the Indian knowledge system in context of River Narmada, when I try to understand what is Indian knowledge system, so Indian knowledge systems talks about, there are three pillars of Indian knowledge system. First is tradition or the parampara. Second is the vision, or what is our long-term perspective, why what we want to think about. And third is lokik prayojan, which is the actual execution of any kind of project, like what you see in terms of physical. Okay. Now, when we say parampara, so here I want to give you one example which is very much relevant to River Narmada. So as I am working on this particular River Narmada, there is a very long tradition of performing a Narmada Parikrama, in which people move on foot along the stretch of River Narmada, which is almost around 1312 kilometers. So they start from one point and they go up to Amarkantak, and then again they come at the same point, crossing the Khambat in Gujarat. Okay, so this is a tradition which is ongoing for so many years. Now, when I try to find out from where this particular tradition started, so the history backs to that in we have mention of this particular thing in our Skand Purana in Revakhand, that it was the first person was Rishi Markandeya who performed this particular Narmada Parikrama, and he took almost 3 years, 3 months, and 13 days to complete this particular parikrama. So this is how it started, and now people do it religiously. Okay. Now, what is the implication of this particular tradition is that as a result of this, there is emergence of number of infrastructure projects along this Narmada Parikrama mark. So one such example is this particular statue of Adi Shankaracharya, which is there in Omkareshwar. Okay. So second thing is drashti. So I discussed about the parampara. The parampara is that people go on a parikrama on foot on along the river, which is almost 1312 into 2 kilometers, for which took almost almost 3 years. Okay. Now people are doing it in a different manner. Now people are also using vehicles. There are people who do it in a hybrid mode and so on. Now, what is related to this? What exactly is the perception? What is the vision behind this? The vision is that it has been treated, the river has been treated is a holy river, and as a result, there are different tirthas, there are different snan ghats, there are different tapovan, there are different parikrama niyams, and then there are certain way of living which people adopt during this particular thing. Okay, so that is their thought process. That is the kind of feeling people have. Okay, now coming to the different stories which we extracted from the different sources. So when we started this particular study, to start with, we have studied different Purana, which one particular Puran which I would like to specifically mention here was Narmada Puran. And in Narmada Puran, there was mention of so many stories. So one particular story is related to, actually there is some disturbance. Can someone please fix it? There is some echo or okay. Now there are different stories. One particular story is for the birth of river Narmada, like how it has originated from a particular location. So as we know that Narmada starts from a mountain called Maikal in Amarkantak, a place called Amarkantak. So this is basically, there are two different mountain valleys, where the Satpura ranges and Vindhyachal ranges intersect at one particular point in Amarkantak, from where this river Narmada has started. And there was a lot of mythological stories related to this. And one such story is that Lord Shiva, once he consumed poison during this Manthan, Samudra Manthan, then he come to this particular place and performed tapasya to cool himself. And during his tapasya, he secreted his sweat, and that become the river Narmada. So this is one story which is related to the birth of river Narmada. Then there is what exactly there is and what are the scientific evidences and how it has to be understood. So as I said, the myth is Narmada is born from Shiva's sweat. That is one thing. Where it has been mentioned, it is mentioned in the Skanda Purana, and in Skanda Purana there is one chapter called Revakhand, in which it is said that it is there. Now, what is the scientific analog says? When we study geomorphology, when we study geography, it says that there is a perennial spring emergence, groundwater from a high elevation headwater zone, which is sustained by rainfall recharge. This is what geography or the science says. What is the evidence? The evidence is that there is a description that Amarkantak headwaters are there in modern basin descriptions. Like when we study with the help of GIS maps. So what exactly we can conclude? We can conclude that these two things are converging. The location which is mentioned in Purana, the description where the location is given is very much mentioning, but whether it diverges on literal divine causation, whether it is the sweat of Lord Shiva or not, cannot be confirmed from this particular thing. Similarly, again in the text, there is a myth that Narmada flowed out of Rudra's body. Rudra's body means Shiva's body. Okay. So this has been mentioned in Kurma Purana. There is a Kurma Purana where there is part 2 where it talks about glory of Narmada. So what is personification of landscape? Now, we had been doing this in literature, personification. So here the river is an emanation from a structural tectonic body. So there is earth crust, there are tectonic plates, and they very much verify that this tectonic control of valley by major faults and elements, and as a result, there is a multi-phase crustal evolution and river is there. These are the evidences which are present there. So what is the convergence? The convergence is that there is a poetic odium that the river comes out of the body of the land. Okay. And what we cannot confirm is we cannot literally take it is a anthropomorphic physiology that it emerges out of the Rudra's body. Again, the source of river is mentioned in different mythological documents is Amarkanta. Kurma Purana explicitly mentioned the later traditions. There are headwater at Amarkantak Plateau, specific springs, ponds, and complexes. Again, the official basin description given by Indian risk places risk near Amarkantak with an elevation of, so there is a rise near Amarkantak with an elevation of 1057. And this particular thing has been very well converged. So there is a strong convergence that a specific location which is mentioned there and the physical geography coincides there. Okay. Then again, there are different stories with respect to emergence of river Narmada as well as river Son. And then there are again stories why Son is moving in a different direction and why Narmada is the only river which is moving towards Arabian Sea, whereas most of the Indian rivers are going into Bay of Bengal. So this is how we started studying the text one by one. So we have a limitation of time, so we cannot go with all the examples. Again, coming back to the thing which we studied from the literature, we put that particular thing under the category of tradition or the parampara, that there is a parampara that people took parikrama along the river. Now, what should be the drashti? So here I would like to quote that I'm sure you might be familiar with this person. He is late Anil Mahadav Dave, who was our environment minister for a very short time, but he was a very sensitive person in a way. He has conducted this Narmada Parikrama on foot. Also, he has traveled across the river Narmada through waterway and also through airways. He himself was a pilot, so he was having a Cessna and he has done the survey of this entire area. And he was very particular that all the development along the river Narmada should be in human scale. It should not be very, what you call it, is monumental, and it has to be very grounded so that the very nature of river Narmada remains the same. Okay. There are people who are now engaged into having different kind of NGOs and other people who are working for the restoration of river Narmada. So also there is different kind of interpretation by a scholar called Amritlal Vegad, who was a scholar from Shanti Niketan, and he spent his entire life writing about. He was a very good painter, also a trained painter from Shanti Niketan. So he has done a lot of paintings, and he has very good literature. Also, has contributed many books on the beauty of river Narmada. So the way he looked at the river Narmada was a very different one. Whatever literate people can do in terms of it as a very poetic expression of river Narmada, I can say. Now, coming after discussing about the tradition, after discussing about the vision, and also in vision, we have seen different perspective. One perspective is developing that particular land for the parikrama vasis, and also development will happen irrespective of whatever, because change is there, so development has to be there. The second was how to look at the river Narmada from a very different perspective, from a poet perspective, from a perspective of a painter, from an artistic perspective. And second and the last thing is what is the practical utility. So when it comes to practical utility, then here our role becomes important. There are forest areas, there are settlements, there is mining engaged into it, there is agriculture engaged into it, hydropower, tourism, irrigation, industry. So all these projects are all along the river Narmada, not only along the river Narmada, each and every river of our nation. Okay, so this is just to give you the idea where the Parikrama Vasis are moving. So it's almost 1312 kilometer, and the stretch is, so the Parikrama Vasi, they have to almost to travel 2600 kilometers. Okay, Now, when we were talking about the different use of different kind of tools, so this is one such outcome of such a tool where LULC is done at a very in a very detailed manner, and this gives us the idea about how the different urban areas are emerging along the river. The yellow one, you can see the agricultural belt, and the green one is the forest area. Now, I was talking about the impact of different utility projects. So one major utility which we see across the river, and when we will be doing the longitudinal study, we are making an effort to see what was the course of the river before construction of all these big dams. You can see all these big dams: Bargi Dam, Omkareshwar Dam, Maheshwar Dam, Indira Dam, all are big projects along the river, including the Sardar Sarovar Dam. Now, what are the different perspectives which come out of this? So, from the emergence point of view, we can think in terms of heritage. So, Amarkantak, from where the river started, there is natural heritage, there is built heritage. Then the next phase after crossing the Amarkantak is the forest area. So, here is a very rich biodiversity, and here the course of river is very volatile. It is the velocity is very high, and the river is really very violent in this particular area. And also we have lot and lot of forest area and rich biodiversity in this area. Then comes the city of Jabalpur, where you have this marble rocks, and recently it is very infamous for the accident which happened in the river Narmada at Bargi Dam. Okay, so there are different tourism sites. Then also we need to understand, when we talk about sustainability as a researcher, that we need to understand we are a developing nation, and we cannot have the same kind of vision for our sustainability like those of developed regions. So this particular image will show you the importance of dams. Like, as an environmentalist, as an architect, we always have this tendency to say no to large scale infrastructure projects, but then we should understand the reality of our entire nation as well. So this is a picture of 1988, and now you see what change this dam has brought in, specifically in the state of Gujarat. So the way the river course, the dam has changed the river course, the level of water, the area which is for irrigation. Okay, same with the different settlements, how the cities are changing. Okay, now I am putting emphasizing much and every time on that, until and unless you understand the people who are residing in those settlements, we cannot conduct studies. Because when we look at the GIS maps and when we look at the reality, we need to understand and appreciate the dynamics. Like, you look at this particular river bank, which in GIS will be shown in one particular patch of sand, but what activity is actually happening into this areas is equally important. Now, we also need to understand the way government is looking at this particular thing. So we have this development. Now we talk about river sensitive urbanization. So whatever is happening in Delhi happens in every state capital. On the same way, whatever is happening in Gange, we have to do it for Narmada. Then we have these different projects which will be coming shortly in all those areas. And then the beautiful views drawn by our architect friends doing urban design of this area. So how this thing is going to change, whether these changes are desirable or not, whether we need to move in the direction, what kind of sensitivity we can bring in. So we have seen the impact of dams, we have seen the impact of tourism, we have seen what kind of environmental impact of tourism they are there, what are the challenges we are familiar with. Okay, so what will be the role of architect and planner in this, how we are going to solve problem of this. So again, coming back to the same thing from where we started, with this example, we started with that there has to be tradition, there is a vision, and then there is a reflection of the same on the physical Lokik Pariyojana or the physical projects, infrastructure projects which are upcoming. So here we need to understand and realize that what we need to put as an outcome of our research. Is it the parampara or is it the tradition we would like to continue, or what should be our vision? So here is an example of built heritage. Here is an example of cultural heritage. Here is an example of um, environmental heritage or natural heritage as well. How to retain this? Okay, this is an age-old image or an idol of river Narmada, which was found in Chaussat Yogini temple. So this was the representation of the river Narmada at one point of time. So we need to understand, are we doing justice when we are talking about this Lokik Prayojan, or when we are going with all this kind of physical development, social development, cultural development, development of tourism. So we need to keep in mind whatever the SDGs are. I am not saying, again, I am putting a disclaimer. It is very true that we have not reached a stage where we should compete with the developed nations in terms of achieving sustainability. We are far behind them. We need to reach a certain level. We have to think in a different manner. But then at the same time, one day we have to do the same thing. Okay. So we need to understand this. We need to understand the vision for this of the great visionaries. Then it is up to us, how do we interpret the things, how do we reinterpret the things, and how do we interpret the intended interpretations. So this is how we have to look at the research when we are talking about our research in architecture. So this was a small example. I hope I was able to present certain things before you within the limited time. So I would be happy to answer if there are any queries.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful and enriching session. So we shall now move towards the question answer session. Now I'd like to ask any questions you have, participants.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Yogesh Bhardwaj. I am teaching here in AS.
Yes, Yogesh. Yeah.
Sir, we already met at CSC workshop last
Yes. Yogesh. I just want to inform you that I can share this with you.
Yes.
Actually, you might have observed that throughout the 5 days I was working on my laptop.
Okay, sir.
So actually it was this was the project which actually I was writing that time.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
immediately after coming from that workshop, I submitted this project and fortunately I got it.
Okay, even I have some common related to this stretch only. I
Yeah,
am during my PhD course, I was working on impact of industrialization on some parts of Narmada.
Very
So
good.
I somewhat found that if you are aware of the stretch of Pithampur and Indore, so there are all industries, agglomeration of industries which are coming there. There is already potential there. So these urban challenges, I mean, growing urban challenges and upcoming industries, what through the Amrit mission, the government is planning is to take more water from lower parts of Narmada and pushing upper parts of Indore and Devas. So I was questioning, and even it was intrigue in my mind how these challenges will be there. Even there is nothing in terms of saving the water on surface, or I mean there is no sensitivity related to that in the government or in the entire urban areas. On top of that, the people are talking, even the provisions are lifting water from that area to upper parts of Indores. So that is what the the challenges what I recall from this presentation. Sir, I have a question related, I mean, apart from this entire wonderful presentation.
Please. Yeah.
Discuss about integrating all those methodologies different different types of new technologies related to research. So you already been through theses and researches of planning, architecture at national and international levels. Sir, can you highlight the weak and good methodologies for us?
Actually, I can very well highlight the weak methodologies because the reason being what happens that there is not consistency in our work. Like when you go through the research work of any person, so what you see is the research questions are framed very well. They have a very good research methodology, but somehow there are certain practical realities which we have to accept that while concluding, there are certain things which do not go in consistency with what they had shown in research methodology. Okay, so I don't see any harm in revising our research methodology or narrowing down or scaling down the methodology. So the key thing which the takeaway from this thing is, what is the purpose of research? The very purpose of research is there is something very complicated which we cannot understand. Okay, and now you have to simplify it for your audience so that they can understand it easily. Okay, so we have to think of three different type of audience in our mind. Say for example, if your PhD is on Narmada, so there are three takeaways from your PhD, and those three things should be very strong. The one thing is, I am not interested in your PhD topic, but I am interested in River Narmada. So whether your thesis has a very good data of River Narmada, latest data of River Narmada, that is one thing which is a first takeaway for me. Second thing would be, during your research, it is quite possible that you might have used new technologies. Like I was talking about AI and other thing. I think AI it's a wonderful thing. Like if you know how to use it, so you can do miracles. Okay, so second thing would be, what are the different techniques which you are using? Okay, so I may be using your techniques as it is, so whether you have that sufficient information in your thesis or not. And third thing is the aspect in which you are working. So let us say if you are working on a sanitation project, if you are working on an industrial project, so what is required in that particular area, you have conducted a detailed literature review that can be very well useful for others. So if these three pillars are strong in any of the thesis, so we can say it's a good methodology adopted. And
Great, sir. Thank you for highlighting the key aspect of that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So come time to Bhopal. So come sometime to Bhopal. Maybe we will go to Indore together. Yeah.
Good, sir. Sure.
Any other questions, participants? Yes, Pragya?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. This is
Good afternoon.
Pragya.
Good afternoon.
So I'm a PhD scholar and I'm in second year of my thesis right now. And I've taken a topic where I'm culturally connecting residential spaces. So first of all, the topic might be have created some questions in the RSCs also, that why an architect is looking into the cultural interaction with the building. So even to defend my topic in front of the RSCs, it was a challenge for me because the thing was that when I'm talking about the residential buildings, that to high-rise buildings, and when we are connecting them to culturally required spaces over there. So that was a challenge for me because most of the people are now, even the builders or even the methodologies of constructing the high-rise building has shifted totally towards the economic factor only. So they are leaving the cultural factor. So I need a guidance how I can move ahead and how I can defend myself, that if I want to have a cultural aspect also in designing. So it is an important factor because if we go through the history of architecture, culture has been playing a major role in doing any architectural building, any marvelous building that has been built in history. Culture was a major role in that. So, but in today's scenario, how to defend myself that if we are going ahead for the contemporary housing buildings, that still culture has to be play a major role. So if you can guide me how to move ahead, and if you can suggest me some techniques so that I can start up with my studies and surveys, that will be very helpful for me.
Yeah, you see, when we talk about any traditional town or even a small town which exists today, in the same way, if you go to any such places, you will see that there the streets are not exactly used as streets. They are more of a socio-cultural spaces, isn't it?
Yeah.
Suppose there is some kind of function in someone's family. Hmm?
Hmm.
So what will happen? They will encroach upon the road. Everyone will participate in this. So it is a very common practice, even which is still prevailing in this kind of things. Or even if you study the neighborhoods of public sector units, like recently now all these things are going for demonetization, redevelopment is going on. All the old government housing stock, which is 50, 60 years old, they are going for redevelopment. So if you study the lifestyle of such areas, so you will see that the areas, the marginal open space become their playground. The marginal open spaces become their, the ladies will from different houses will come and doing their chit chatting and other things. Even for that matter, if you go to any organic slum, you will find so many places where the streets are not only used for the purpose of transportation, they are social spaces where people are interacting, where things are happening. Now, if you talk about any society or a gated community in particular, so until and unless you have a specific place for this, you are not doing this. And as a result, you can very well take the crime rate of cities like Noida, the new colonies, which are the new societies which are coming in society, where the elderly people are feeling neglected, isn't it?
Yes.
They are very much vulnerable to crime. So what is the reason? The reason is because our culture has changed, isn't it? I mean, recently I came across a situation which is a very sad thing, that someone died in a particular society and the neighbors didn't allow ambulance to come. They said that you have to stay, this ambulance has to be almost 100 to 100 meters away from my residence. So this is the kind of neighbors we are having nowadays, isn't it? So this is because of this, because this culture is somewhere it is, I should say, vanishing amongst us, isn't it?
Hmm.
Otherwise, there was a time the neighbor was the most reliable person.
Yes.
Now you talk about the cities like Noida, you talk about cities like Gurgaon, wherein you cannot rely on your own relatives.
Hmm.
I think in your, I have evaluated one thesis of Charu Madam, Dr. Charu Nangia. You go
Okay.
to her thesis, you will come to know that most of the crimes are committed by the people who are acquainted to the family. Okay, so this is because of cultural absence. So this gives you sufficient reason to do a thesis on cultural spaces, or what kind of spaces, how culturally connected this residences should be or unit should be.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other question? Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for delivering such an insightful and thoughtful, thought-provoking session on inductive, deductive, and retroductive research approaches. The session provided participants with clear understanding of the philosophical and methodological foundation of research and highlighted how different research approaches contribute to knowledge generations in architecture and allied disciplines. Your valuable insights, practice examples, and research perspectives have greatly enriched the understanding of participants and will certainly help them adopt appropriate methodologies in their future academic and professional research. On behalf of MIT School of Architecture and Planning, I, Dr. Snigdha Chaudhary, sincerely thank you for your valuable time, guidance, contributions to this faculty development program. We truly appreciate your support and inspiring interactions with all the participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
So with this, we conclude to day one of the faculty development program. Thank you for your active participation. We look forward to welcome you again tomorrow for the another enriching day of learning. Thank you, everyone. All the physical participants, there is a high tea has been arranged outside the conference hall. Please come and have it. Thank you, sir.